Sleep matters. Mirror self-trap. Imagine a room where every wall is a mirror. No matter where you turn, your own reflection follows you. At first, it feels fascinating, comforting, even. You adjust your hair, fix your clothes, and smile back at yourself. But soon, it becomes exhausting. Every move, every glance, every flaw constantly watched, constantly judged. There is no escape. This is the mirror self-trap. In our minds, we often live in that room. We begin to see ourselves not as we are, but as we think others see us. We perform for an invisible audience, molding our behavior, choices, even thoughts, to match expectations that may not even exist. It starts small. A comment here, a glance there, and suddenly, we are living a version of ourselves designed for approval. This trap is subtle. It wears the face of self-awareness, but it is built on insecurity. Instead of growing from within, we grow through reflection bouncing off others, losing our original shape. We judge our worth through filtered selfies, compare our lives to curated feeds, and craft identities not from who we are, but from what we think we should be. Children fall into this trap early. A praise becomes a pattern. A criticism. A cage. Good boy. Pretty girl. Smart kid. These labels become mirrors we learn to live up to. Over time, we forget who we were before the labels. We forget how to be alone without feeling lonely, how to exist without performing. But here's the quiet truth. The mirrors are not real. They are illusions built from fear and habit. Step outside the room, and you'll find a different world, one without reflections. A world where you do things not to be seen, but because they matter to you. A world where silence is not emptiness, but clarity. Breaking free from the mirror self-trap starts with noticing. When you make a choice, ask, is this truly for me, or for the image of me I want others to admire? When you speak, ask, do I believe these words, or are they a performance? It takes courage to step out of the mirror room. It means letting go of applause. It means walking away from validation. But what you gain is priceless. Authenticity, peace, the ability to be with yourself, as yourself, without needing a reflection to prove you exist. Because sometimes the most powerful freedom is the freedom from your own reflection. Choice echo loop. Imagine walking into a hallway lined with doors. Behind each one is a version of your future. Some are familiar, others strange. You pick one, enter, and the door shuts behind you. Suddenly, the hallway reappears only now. It echoes your last choice. The other doors begin to vanish, replaced by versions of the same path you just took. And before you know it, you are trapped in a loop of your own making. This is the choice echo loop. In life, we often believe we have unlimited options, and we dote first. But each decision narrows the road. The more choices we make, the fewer paths remain. What begins as freedom slowly becomes repetition. Not because the world limits us, but because we keep choosing the familiar. The trap lies not in the choice itself, but in the echo. Once we choose, our minds begin to justify. We seek evidence that confirms we were right. We ignore signs that suggest otherwise. We surround ourselves with people, information, and habits that reinforce our original decision. The loop grows stronger, louder. Think of the person who picks a career early, then spends decades convincing themselves it was the right one, even if their heart quietly disagrees. Or the individual who chooses a belief system, then filters every experience to fit that frame. The choice echo loop isn't about right or wrong. It's about being stuck in one sound, one rhythm, one story. Breaking the loop requires silence. It means pausing the echoes. It means asking uncomfortable questions. Do I still believe what I believed 5 years ago? 10? Am I growing or just circling? It also requires bravado to open doors again, even after you've walked through one. To admit that change is not failure, but evolution. The hallway of life is always there. The doors may look the same, but new paths exist beyond them. You just have to be willing to listen for new echoes. Because sometimes the truest choice is choosing to choose again. Empathy void. Imagine you're standing in a crowded room, people laughing, talking, sharing stories. Their voices blend into a comfortable hum, yet something feels off. You glance around, searching for a connection, for someone whose eyes meet yours with understanding. But all you see are mask smiles worn out of habit, nods without meaning. And in that moment, even though you're surrounded by people, you feel completely alone. This is not loneliness of the physical kind. It's something deeper, more unsettling. You feel invisible, not because no one sees you, but because no one truly understands you. Welcome to the empathy void as psychological trap, where understanding is absent, where human connection seems like a far-off dream. At its heart, the empathy void is not about being ignored. It's about being misunderstood. It's when people around you listen to respond, not to understand. When your emotions are met with logical arguments, when your silence is mistaken for peace, and your struggle is brushed off as drama. It is a void not of people, but of presence. Humans are wired for connection. Evolution favored those who could collaborate, share, and feel for one another. Our survival depended on it. But somewhere in the rush of modern life, the speed of information, and the endless cycle of digital interaction, we lost that thread. We stopped listening with our hearts. We forgot how to stand still with someone's pain. This trap often forms early. Perhaps as a child, your feelings were dismissed, your tears labeled as overreaction, your questions as interruptions. You learned to suppress emotion, to build walls. And slowly, you began doing the same to others. It's not cruelty, it's conditioning. The empathy void isn't always loud. It can be quiet. It shows up in relationships where one person constantly gives while the other takes. In friendships that feel like performances. In families that talk but never speak. And as time goes on, the void deepens not because others don't care, but because they've forgotten how to show it. But here's the thing. This trap can be broken not by fixing others, but by awakening something within yourself. It starts with a pause. When someone shares, don't rush to advise or analyze. Just be with them. In silence, in stillness. Let your presence be a mirror, not a hammer. Empathy isn't about agreeing, it's about understanding. It's sitting beside someone in the dark and saying, I may not fully know your pain, but I am here with you. When you begin to give that kind of presence, something changes. You start noticing subtleties, the way a voice trembles, the way someone avoids eye contact, the words unspoken between sentences. You become more alive to the experience of others. And paradoxically, you begin to feel more understood yourself. In this way, the empathy void becomes less of a prison and more of a passage, a place you once fell into, but now walk through with awareness. So next time you're with someone, really be with them. Let go of judgment, prediction, even the need to fix. Just feel, just listen, just be. Because in a world full of noise, your quiet empathy might just be the loudest act of love. Empathy void. Imagine you're standing in a crowded room, people laughing, talking, sharing stories. Their voices blend into a comfortable hum, yet something feels off. You glance around, searching for a connection, for someone whose eyes meet yours with understanding. But all you see are mask smiles worn out of habit, nods without meaning. And in that moment, even though you're surrounded by people, you feel completely alone. This is not loneliness of the physical kind. It's something deeper, more unsettling. You feel invisible, not because no one sees you, but because no one truly understands you. Welcome to the empathy void as psychological trap, where understanding is absent, where human connection seems like a far-off dream. At its heart, the empathy void is not about being ignored. It's about being misunderstood. It's when people around you listen to respond, not to understand. When your emotions are met with logical arguments, when your silence is mistaken for peace, and your struggle is brushed off as drama. It is a void not of people, but of presence. Humans are wired for connection. Evolution favored those who could collaborate, share, and feel for one another. Our survival depended on it. But somewhere in the rush of modern life, the speed of information, and the endless cycle of digital interaction, we lost that thread. We stopped listening with our hearts. We forgot how to stand still with someone's pain. This trap often forms early. Perhaps as a child, your feelings were dismissed, your tears labeled as overreaction, your questions as interruptions. You learned to suppress emotion, to build walls, and slowly you began doing the same to others. It's not cruelty, it's conditioning. The empathy void isn't always loud. It can be quiet. It shows up in relationships where one person constantly gives while the other takes, in friendships that feel like performances, in families that talk but never speak. And as time goes on, the void deepens not because others don't care, but because they've forgotten how to show it. But here's the thing. This trap can be broken not by fixing others, but by awakening something within yourself. It starts with a pause. When someone shares, don't rush to advise or analyze. Just be with them, in silence, in stillness. Let your presence be a mirror, not a hammer. Empathy isn't about agreeing, it's about understanding. It's sitting beside someone in the dark and saying, I may not fully know your pain, but I am here with you. When you begin to give that kind of presence, something changes. You start noticing subtleties, the way a voice trembles, the way someone avoids eye contact, the words unspoken between sentences. You become more alive to the experience of others. And paradoxically, you begin to feel more understood yourself. In this way, the empathy void becomes less of a prison and more of a passage, a place you once fell into, but now walk through with awareness. So next time you're with someone, really be with them. Let go of judgment, prediction, even the need to fix. Just feel, just listen, just be. Because in a world full of noise, your quiet empathy might just be the loudest act of love. Memory fog effect. Imagine waking up in a room that feels oddly familiar, but nothing is exactly where you think it should be. You open a drawer expecting to find your journal, but inside are scattered pages from a book you don't recall reading. The light switches aren't in their usual spots, and the paintings on the wall look like fragments of dreams recognizable, yet unreachable. This is the unsettling yet curious sensation of the memory fog effect, where reality blurs with forgotten details and distorted recollections. The memory fog effect is a psychological trap where past experiences become hazy and our mind tries to fill the blanks with assumptions. It's not quite forgetfulness and not quite confusion. It's the middle ground where facts and feelings blend. This effect makes us question what truly happened and what our brain has created to make sense of incomplete data. You might experience this when recalling a conversation that didn't go as you now remember it, or when you're certain you placed your keys somewhere but find them in an entirely different place. Over time, these small shifts build into a FOGA filter that colors our perception of reality and of ourselves. This trap can affect relationships too. Arguments arise from misremembered words, and people drift apart because they're reacting to versions of events that never truly occurred. The fog thickens when emotions like stress, nostalgia, or regret enter the picture, bending memories even more. To clear this fog, mindfulness is key. Writing down events soon after they happen can offer clarity later. Asking others for their recollection can also help triangulate truth. In a world filled with noise and haste, our memory becomes the first casualty. But there's beauty in the fog, too. It teaches us to question. It reminds us that the mind is not a perfect recorder, but a storyteller on that adds, subtracts, and embellishes. And in understanding the fog, we understand our fragile, fascinating humanity. Attention drip. Picture a leaking faucet. Drop by drop, the water falls slow, rhythmic, and persistent. Now imagine your attention doing the same. A message here, a glance there, a thought nudging you from the corner of your mind. This is the attention drip. Not an explosion, not a distraction loud enough to notice, but a subtle, continuous draining of your focus. We often imagine distraction as something aggressive: notifications buzzing, people interrupting. But more dangerous is this gentle erosion, the way we lose our attention not in moments, but in pieces. We sit to read a book, and halfway through a paragraph, we think of an email. While listening to a friend, we drift to a task waiting at home. Our mind drips away. Psychologists have noted that human attention is a limited resource, and while we may pride ourselves on multitasking, each shift in focus comes at a cost. These little leaks prevent us from reaching deep focus, the kind where ideas flow effortlessly and conversations feel truly meaningful. The attention drip is fueled by modern life, the constant pings, the unending scroll, the pressure to be available. But even without technology, our thoughts are restless. We rehearse imaginary conversations, dwell on past mistakes, or plan 5 steps ahead. All the while, the present slips through our fingers. To counter this, we must learn to plug the leaks. Start with silence. Give yourself time where nothing demands your attention. Practice monotasking, doing one thing and doing it well. And when your mind drips away, gently guide it back without judgment. In a world designed to fragment us, choosing presence is an act of rebellion. And though we may never stop the drip entirely, we can slow it enough to savor the stillness it once drowned. Echo chamber illusion. Imagine shouting into a vast canyon and hearing your voice bounce back not once but again and again, each time louder, more confident, more certain. This is the echo chamber illusion. But the canyon isn't made of rock. It's digital. It's our social media feeds, our curated news, our carefully selected conversations. And the voice that returns is not just our own, it's others repeating what we already believe. The echo chamber illusion is the trap of thinking that because we hear something often, it must be true. It feeds on familiarity and agreement. We follow those who think like us, avoid those who don't, and over time, the world we experience shrinks into a mirror of our own biases. This illusion makes us feel validated, but it also makes us blind. We become less open to new perspectives, more hostile to dissent. Our ideas harden into walls, and behind these walls, growth slows, empathy fades, and misunderstanding thrives. Psychologically, humans seek comfort in agreement. It reassures us. But unchecked, this craving isolates us from complexity. We begin to believe that the truth is obvious, that the other side is foolish or malicious. Nuance vanishes. Breaking the illusion requires effort. It means exposing ourselves to opposing views, not to argue, but to understand. It means questioning why we believe what we do and how we came to hold those beliefs. And sometimes it means sitting in the discomfort of uncertainty. The echo is loud, but it's not all there is. Beyond the canyon, beyond the reflection, there are voices waiting to be heard, soft, strange, and true. All we have to do is listen. Imagination inflation. Close your eyes and think back to a childhood memory. Perhaps a picnic under a tree or a bike ride through the rain. Now, ask yourself, how much of that memory is true, and how much have you filled in over the years? This is the strange and silent power of imagination inflation. Imagination inflation is the psychological trap where imagining an event makes us more likely to believe it truly happened. The more vividly we imagine something, the more familiar it feels. And in our mind, familiarity often masquerades as truth. This effect has been studied in the context of false memories. People asked to imagine mundane scenarios like getting lost in a mall sometimes later recall them as real events. The brain, in its infinite creativity, stitches thoughts and emotions together until fiction becomes indistinguishable from fact. It's not always harmful. In fact, imagination can be healing. Visualizing success, rehearsing conversations, dreaming of possibilities, these are tools of growth. But when we forget what's imagined and what's remembered, we risk building parts of our identity on illusions. Social media can amplify this. A photo here, a caption there, and suddenly our memory of an event changes. We remember the smiles, not the silence. We recall the highlight, not the hesitation. Reality is edited, not just online, but in our minds. To ground ourselves, it helps to revisit our memories with care. Write them down. Speak about them. Acknowledge their fluidity. And when someone else recalls a shared moment differently, pause. It might not be forgetfulness. It might be imagination, inflation at work. Our minds are not archives, they're gardens. And imagination is both the sunlight and the storm. Handle it gently. Familiarity Loop. Imagine walking into a room you've never seen before, yet feeling like you've been there. The colors, the smell, the hum of the fanet, all feels known. Welcome to the Familiarity Loop. This psychological trap convinces us that because something feels familiar, it must be right, or good, or true. Our brains, seeking shortcuts, trust the known over the unknown. We choose the song we've heard before, the brand we recognize, the opinion we've read multiple times. Familiarity breeds comfort, but also complacency. We stop questioning. We stop exploring. We favor repetition over novelty, and in doing so, we limit growth. This loop plays out in relationships too. People return to toxic dynamics because they feel comfortable. Patterns repeat because change feels too foreign. The loop traps us in yesterday, masking it as safety. Advertisers and politicians use this trap expertly. Repetition becomes persuasion. The more often a message is heard, the more truth it seems to carry, not because it's logical, but because it's familiar. Breaking the loop means embracing the unfamiliar, trying the new dish, reading the different viewpoint, sitting with the strange. Growth begins where comfort ends. The familiarity loop is not evil. It's a part of being human. But when we see it for what it is, a habit, not a truth, we reclaim the power to choose. To step off the loop and into something new. Let curiosity, not comfort, guide you. Silence bias. Imagine you're sitting in a meeting. People are tossing around ideas, opinions bouncing back and forth like a ball in a casual game. You have a thought, something insightful, something that could shift the whole conversation. But you don't say it. The room goes quiet for a second, and then someone else speaks. The moment slips away. This is where silence bias begins to creep in, not just for you, but for everyone in that room. When a voice remains silent, our minds often assume it agrees with the louder ones. We think silence means consent. But that's not always true. Many times, silence hides disagreement, discomfort, or even deep insight that simply wasn't spoken. In everyday life, this bias shows up when people don't protest something they disapprove of. In classrooms, students stay quiet, even when they're confused. In families, one person might not argue but carries hurt inside. Silence isn't always peace, it can be a quiet battlefield. We also judge people's character through this lens. The quiet one in the group might be seen as wise or agreeable, even when they're simply unsure. Our minds fill the blanks of silence with our own assumptions. To free ourselves from silence bias, we need to pause and remember. Silence has many meanings. Ask rather than assume. Invite the quiet voices. Speak when you have something to share, even if it shakes the stillness. Because sometimes the world needs the truth you're holding in silence. The invisible influence. Picture this. You're walking through a grocery store. Soft music plays in the background. You reach for a bottle of wine, not knowing that the song playing is French, and somehow that nudges you to choose a French label. This is the invisible influence. It's subtle, like wind, through leaves felt, but not seen. It's the power of the environment, the group, the tone of a room shaping our behavior without us ever noticing. It happens in social media feeds where certain voices echo louder. It happens in advertisements designed to make you feel like you're missing out. It happens in the expressions of people around you, hinting at what's normal. You think your choices are your own, but often they're reactions to unseen nudges. This influence doesn't ask for permission. It works best when you don't notice it. To regain your freedom, bring awareness to the quiet pressures around you. Question your urges. Why are you reaching for this product, saying that word, choosing that path? Ask yourself if it's really you or the invisible influence holding the pen. Truth decay. Imagine a library where the books slowly fade, one sentence at a time. You open a history book, and where once there was clarity, there's now a vague paragraph. Facts feel blurry. This is truth decay, a slow fading of trust in facts, in sources, in truth itself. Truth decay isn't loud. It creeps in through repetition, confusion, and overload. So many voices, so many opinions, all shouted at once. And soon, you don't know who to believe. It feels easier to stop believing altogether. We begin to rely on emotions, not evidence. We seek comfort, not clarity. And when everyone has their own version of truth, real truth feels like a ghost present, but unreachable. In this fog, it becomes easy to manipulate people. If nothing is real, anything can be claimed. It erodes the bridges between people, leaving only islands of belief, disconnected and isolated. But truth still matters, and to reclaim it, we must slow down. Listen deeply. Check before sharing. Seek voices that challenge you, not just comfort you. Because the fight against truth decay starts with a single choice: to care. Clarity, Mirage. Imagine you're lost in a desert, and far in the distance, you see water. It looks clear, real, close. You walk toward it, but it disappears. That's what the clarity mirage is like. It's the illusion that we understand more than we do. You read a headline and feel like you know the whole story. You hear a confident voice, and you trust the words without question. Clarity feels good, comforting, but sometimes it's false. We prefer simple answers. We crave neat conclusions. But life is rarely that tidy. The clarity mirage tricks us into settling too soon into thinking we know when we're only guessing. This trap appears when people make bold claims with no room for doubt. It appears in rushed judgments, snap opinions, fast news. We chase that feeling of knowing because uncertainty feels like drowning. But wisdom doesn't fear uncertainty. It sits with it. It listens longer. It waits. To escape the clarity mirage, pause when things feel too obvious. Ask, what am I missing? Who gains from this version of clarity? And remember, true understanding often begins with a question, not an answer. Thought spill trap. Imagine holding a glass of water filled to the brim. You walk carefully, but with each step, a drop spills over the edge. Eventually, there's a trail behind you, a path of tiny messes you didn't mean to make. This is the thought spill trap. It's what happens when unfiltered thoughts spill into our words, expressions, and actions. You didn't mean to hurt someone, but a careless joke slipped. You didn't intend to reveal your fear, but your tone gave it away. Our thoughts don't stay neatly inside. They leak into our choices. They shape our tone. They whisper through body language. And often, we're not aware of how much we're saying without meaning to. This trap becomes dangerous when we believe we're fully in control. When we don't notice our sarcasm, our envy, our anxiety speaking for us. Others see it even when we don't. To free yourself from the thought spill trap, cultivate awareness. Notice the emotion behind your words. Pay attention to your silences, too. What are you thinking, and how is it shaping your presence in the world? Because every thought is a seed, and in the soil of expression, it grows sometimes into kindness, sometimes into something far harder to undo. False depth bias. Imagine sitting by a calm lake at dawn. The water reflects the pink sky, and for a moment, it feels as though you could touch the clouds on its surface. But the reflection is an illusion, a trick of the eye. The lake might seem shallow, but drop a stone, and you'll realize how deep and silent it truly is. In life, our minds do something similar. We often mistake complexity for wisdom, verbosity for insight, and surface-level knowledge for depth. This is the trap of false depth bias. False depth bias is a psychological tendency to perceive ideas, people, or content as more profound than they actually are, simply because they appear sophisticated or are presented in complex ways. It's the reason why a person might find deep meaning in vague statements, or believe that someone who speaks in complicated language is automatically intelligent. Our minds crave clarity, but we are also drawn to mystery. When something is unclear, we sometimes interpret that lack of understanding as depth. Think of a speaker who uses abstract language, long sentences, and lofty metaphors. The audience may feel impressed, but upon closer inspection, the meaning is often hollow. In contrast, someone who explains profound truths in simple words may be overlooked. This bias affects our choices in everything from who we follow, to the books we read, and even the ideas we defend. Sometimes we choose what seems wise rather than what is wise. The more complex or cryptic something sounds, the more we believe it must be meaningful. The danger is subtle. It leads us to overvalue complexity and undervalue simplicity. It creates an echo chamber where convoluted ideas thrive, while straightforward truths fade into the background. The antidote? Curiosity mixed with skepticism. Question what appears deep. Ask, is this truly insightful, or does it only sound that way? Remember, real wisdom doesn't hide in tangled words. It invites clarity. It resonates. It makes you feel like you've remembered something you always knew, rather than learned something foreign. Like the lake at dawn, beauty and depth exist but only if we learn to look beyond the reflection. Cognitive tunneling. You are driving through thick fog at night. The headlights cut a narrow path ahead, and instinctively, your focus narrows. You stop noticing what's on the sides of the road. Your world becomes tunnel-shaped, guided only by what's right in front of you. This is not just a driving experience, it's a mental trap known as cognitive tunneling. Cognitive tunneling happens when your brain focuses too intensely on a single piece of information, ignoring other relevant cues. Under stress, pressure, or even distraction, our mental field shrinks. Instead of seeing the full picture, we fixate on a detail and often the wrong one. Imagine a surgeon focused on a particular symptom while ignoring others that don't match their hypothesis. Or a pilot who concentrates on one warning light while a larger problem goes unnoticed. Or simply, you trying to solve a problem, but so obsessed with one angle that you miss the obvious solution. This trap is common during high-pressure moments. The brain thinks it's helping by filtering out the noise, but in doing so, it sometimes filters out truth. When you're caught in this tunnel, it's hard to zoom out. The world feels smaller. Options seem fewer. To escape, you must remember to breathe, literally and mentally. Pause, step back, widen your view. Ask questions like, what am I not seeing? What would someone else notice that I'm missing? Cognitive tunneling doesn't mean you're careless. It means your brain is trying to protect you by narrowing your attention. But growth lives in the periphery, in the details you nearly ignored, in the questions you were too focused to ask. Dream state confusion. Close your eyes and imagine waking up in a room you've never seen before. The light is soft, the air still. For a moment, you can't tell if you're dreaming or awake. That strange in-between feeling where reality blurs is more than just poeticits a glimpse into a mental phenomenon called dream state confusion. Dream state confusion is the experience of misinterpreting dreams as memories or waking thoughts. It can lead to real feelings about imagined events, affecting our perceptions, beliefs, and emotions. Have you ever felt angry at someone because of what they did in your dream? Or had a vivid dream that convinced you of something that never happened? This is where dreams cross the boundary into waking life, planting seeds of doubt, suspicion, or even affection. The subconscious doesn't always obey logic. It weaves symbols, emotions, and fragments into a tapestry that can feel more real than reality itself. When we wake, some of these fragments linger, subtly shaping how we think, feel, and behave. This trap plays on the vulnerability of memory and emotion. It creates inner narratives that aren't rooted in facts, yet feel deeply authentic. You might begin to doubt your past, question your actions, or change your behavior based on something your mind imagined while you slept. To navigate this, practice self-inquiry. When you wake with a strong feeling, ask, where did this come from? Is it a reaction to something real or something dreamt? Our dreams can be guides. They speak in symbols and shadows, but they are not always truth. The art is in listening without surrendering, in feeling without falling. The dream world is vast, but reality, though quieter, deserves our full attention too. Identity glitch. You walk past a mirror and pause. For a split second, you feel like you're looking at a stranger. The face is familiar, yet distant. It's you, and it's not. That unsettling sensation, like slipping between realities, is the heart of the identity glitch. Identity glitch is the sudden, often brief, disruption in our sense of who we are. It's that quiet mental jolt when your inner voice feels unfamiliar, when your actions surprise you, or when you question the story you've been telling yourself. We often think of identity as solid, a fixed core that defines us, but in truth, it's more like a flowing river, always shifting, shaped by time, emotion, and memory. When we hit a pause through trauma, reflection, or even a dream, we sometimes glimpse that fluidity, and it can feel like everything is glitching. You might ask, is this really me? Or, have I changed? Or have I just remembered something I forgot? This trap emerges when we cling too tightly to the illusion of a fixed self, when we assume who we were yesterday must define who we are today. The discomfort is natural, but it's also an invitation to explore rather than panic, to see identity not as a cage, but a canvas. You are not broken when you question yourself. You are evolving. The glitch is not an error. It's a crack in the shell where light enters. Mental shortcuts trap. Imagine walking through a dense forest. There's a winding trail ahead, marked by years of footsteps. It's not the shortest route, but it's familiar. Without thinking, you follow it. That's what your brain does too, takes mental shortcuts. The mental shortcuts trap, also known as heuristics, is our mind's tendency to rely on simplified strategies to make quick decisions. These shortcuts help us survive and navigate a complex world, but they also trick us. Your brain uses these paths because they're efficient. When you meet someone who speaks confidently, you may assume they're knowledgeable. When you hear a story often, you believe it more. These are mental shortcuts in action, fast, useful, but not always accurate. They're the reason we stereotype, fall for ads, misjudge risks, or believe repeated lies. It's not that we're lazy, it's that our brains are wired for speed over precision, and when life feels overwhelming, shortcuts feel safe. The trap tightens when we stop questioning, when we confuse ease with truth. To escape, we must slow down, examine our assumptions, ask why we believe what we believe. Mental shortcuts aren't bad. They're tools. But like any tool, they need to be used with care. Sometimes, the long path through the forest reveals more than the quick trail ever could. Comfort illusion. You lie in bed, wrapped in warmth. The room is quiet, familiar, safe. But outside, a storm brews. You know it's there, but you choose to stay under the covers. This moment captures the essence of the comfort illusion. Comfort illusion is the tendency to mistake temporary ease for long-term peace. It's the belief that staying where it's safe, even if it's unfulfilling, is better than stepping into the unknown. We create zones of comfort. Habits, routines, relationships, they become our safety nets. But over time, these nets turn into cages. Growth requires discomfort. Change demands risk. But the illusion whispers, stay, rest, avoid. This trap dulls our ambitions. It softens our edges. It convinces us that pain equals failure and ease equals success. To wake from this illusion is to feel the pull of something greater, a silent knowing that your comfort is costing you your potential. You don't need to leap all at once, just a step, just one breath beyond the familiar. Discomfort isn't danger. Sometimes it's the doorway. Suspicion spiral. Imagine someone you love walks into the room and hesitates before speaking. Something in their tone feels off. You try to shake it off, but a thought creeps in. Are they hiding something? From that single spark, a fire begins the suspicion spiral. Suspicion spiral is the mental trap where small uncertainties snowball into deep distrust. It's a self-reinforcing loop. The more you suspect, the more you notice. The more you notice, the more you suspect. It begins innocently, a late reply, a missing detail, a shift in tone. But the mind, once hooked, starts building a story. And stories, once started, crave an ending even if it's false. This trap is fueled by fear of betrayal, rejection, being wrong. It isolates you, makes you question reality, and pushes others away. The way out is simple, but not easy. Talk, ask, clarify. And most importantly, be aware of your own lens. Are you seeing clearly or through a filter of fear? Suspicion grows in silence, but understanding grows in courage. In the quiet corners of the mind, these traps wait not to harm, but to teach, and once seen, they lose their power. Narrative glue. Imagine a moment when you're listening to a story so gripping that the world around you fades away. Your tea grows cold, your phone buzzes unnoticed. In that moment, your mind is fully immersed. It's as though every word, every image, fits perfectly into a puzzle you didn't know you were solving. This is the power of what we call the narrative glue. Humans are not just creatures of logic. We are creatures of story. Our brains are wired to find meaning in sequences, to link scattered events into coherent tales. We turn chance meetings into destiny, coincidences into fate. The narrative glue is the cognitive trap where our minds bind information more tightly when it's wrapped in a story. Even if the facts are flawed, a good narrative can feel truer than reality itself. This psychological phenomenon explains why fake news spreads faster than retractions, why conspiracy theories persist despite evidence, and why we remember parables more than policy. When events are presented as isolated facts, they can feel forgettable. But lace them into a story, add characters, struggle, resolution, and suddenly they stick. The danger here is subtle. Our craving for stories can blind us to complexity. We oversimplify issues to make them digestible. We reject uncomfortable truths because they don't fit the narrative we prefer. And sometimes we become characters in our own fictional plots, painting villains and heroes where there are only people. So, next time you find yourself swayed by a compelling tale, pause. Ask, am I believing this because it's true or because it's told well? Reality distortion drift. Picture standing in a room of mirrors, each one slightly warped. Some stretch your reflection, others shrink it. None show you the truth. Over time, if you live in that room long enough, you may start to forget what you really look like. That's the essence of reality distortion drift. This trap describes how our perception of reality can slowly shift not through sudden lies, but through repeated exposure to distorted perspectives. A biased news source, a manipulative friend, or even our own inner monologue can act like those warped mirrors. Bit by bit, what we once saw clearly becomes bent. The drift is dangerous because it's gradual. You don't notice it happening. At first, you may question the distortion. Then, you accommodate it. Eventually, you accept it as normal. And once that happens, the truth becomes foreign distant, even threatening. Reality distortion drift thrives in echo chambers and emotionally charged environments. It doesn't rely on changing facts, but on changing filters. When you're shown only one side of an issue, one type of person, one tone of thought, your entire worldview begins to slant. To escape it, we must reintroduce ourselves to contrast. Read opposing views. Listen without defense. Ask uncomfortable questions. Only then can we recalibrate our internal compass and see the world once again as it is. Certainty illusion. Imagine being on a ship in dense fog. You can't see the shore, but you're holding a map so tightly you convince yourself you're not lost. You feel confident. You feel sure. But confidence isn't always clarity. That feeling is the certainty illusion. This trap arises when we mistake confidence for correctness. The stronger we feel about something, the more convinced we become that we must be right. But feelings aren't facts, and conviction is no guarantee of truth. The certainty illusion affects everyone from scientists to politicians to ourselves in quiet conversations. It can lead to overconfidence in judgments, resistance to new information, and a subtle closing of the mind. The more certain we feel, the less curious we become. What's fascinating is how the illusion feeds itself. When we're sure, we seek only confirming evidence. We stop questioning. We stop learning. We build walls around our beliefs and call them truth. But certainty, when left unchecked, becomes a cage. True wisdom often comes with humility, a quiet awareness that what we know is limited and that even our strongest beliefs deserve inspection. So the next time certainty feels overwhelming, consider it a signal not of truth, but of a need to look again. Focus funnel trap. Imagine trying to drink rainwater by holding your mouth to the sky. It's scattered, unfocused. But now imagine placing a funnel, guiding every drop into a single stream. That's how attention works. And sometimes it gets trapped in a funnel too tight to see anything else. This is the focus funnel trap. This mental trap occurs when our attention becomes so narrowly concentrated on one detail, goal, or problem that we lose sight of the bigger picture. In high-pressure moments, we may zero in on a single issue, forgetting alternative options, missing warning signs, or ignoring new opportunities. Think of the chess player who obsesses over defending one piece while the game collapses around him. Or the student who rewrites a single paragraph for hours, never finishing the essay. In the focus funnel, the spotlight becomes a blindfold. It's a natural result of our brain's attempt to be efficient. When overwhelmed, the mind simplifies. It prioritizes. But too much focus becomes tunnel vision. And tunnel vision turns intelligent minds into stubborn ones. To escape this trap, we must build the habit of stepping back. Breathe. Zoom out. Ask, is this still the most important thing? Sometimes clarity isn't in the detail, but in the distance. The confidence slip. Imagine standing at the edge of a diving board. You've done this jump 100 times. You feel sure until suddenly your leg trembles. That slip of confidence catches you off guard. It's not fear. It's uncertainty. This moment captures the confidence slip. This psychological trap appears when our self-assurance falters, not because of failure, but because of self-awareness. The more skilled we become, the more we realize how much we don't know. And in that realization, confidence wavers. It often strikes high performers, those who carry the weight of expectations. A speaker who forgets one line begins doubting the whole speech. A musician who misses one note suddenly questions their talent. It's a paradox. The better we get, the more fragile our confidence can become. Unlike the Dunning-Kruger effect, where novices overestimate their skill, The confidence slip affects those who are competent but introspective. They see the gaps. They care too much. And sometimes that care shakes their certainty. The key is compassion, recognizing that a slip is not a fall. That doubt is not failure. It's a sign of growth, a reminder that confidence is not about being perfect, but about showing up anyway. Overload paralysis. Picture standing in a supermarket aisle lined with 50 brands of cereal. You came for breakfast. Now you're frozen. So many options, so many decisions, and suddenly you want none of them. This is overload paralysis. Our brains are built to decide, but only up to a point. When faced with too many choices, the mind stalls. It begins to overthink, overcompare, overfeel. Every option becomes a burden, and decision-making becomes exhausting. This trap doesn't only live in supermarkets. It shows up in dating apps, streaming platforms, and career paths. The abundance of choices promises freedom, but often delivers stress. We fear making the wrong choice, so we make none at all. Psychologically, this stems from our desire to maximize outcomes. We want the best, and in the pursuit of the best, we miss the good. To break free, we must simplify, set limits, trust intuition, embrace good enough as a wise decision, not a compromise. Because sometimes clarity comes not from having more, but from choosing less. Emotional carryover trap. Imagine walking into a quiet room after a heated argument. Your face is calm, but your thoughts are still spinning. Even as you try to focus on something new, a shadow of the past emotion follows you, clinging to the corners of your mind. This is the emotional carryover trap, a subtle, invisible force that lets past emotions bleed into present judgments. Your mood from one moment doesn't stay locked in the past. It sneaks through the door and into your present choices. A bad day at work can turn a peaceful evening sour. An unresolved feeling from a conversation earlier can make you more irritable while watching a simple video or answering a text. Our brains, in an effort to make sense of our feelings, carry over the emotional weight into the next unrelated task. This trap is especially dangerous because we often don't realize it's happening. We think we're judging something fairly, but in reality, our mind is wearing tinted glasses colored by leftover emotions. It's like tasting salt in your tea because you used the spoon that stirred the soup. Studies have shown that people who watched sad films made more pessimistic decisions afterward, even when the task had nothing to do with sadness. That lingering emotion skewed their thinking. In relationships, it can be even more dangerous. One moment of frustration can color how you hear every word your partner says, even if they meant no harm. The way out of this trap is mindfulness. It means noticing when your emotions from the past are influencing your now. Ask yourself, is this reaction really about what's happening right now? Or is it something else, trying to finish its story through me? A deep breath, a pause, a short reflection, these small things help you return to the present. False progress illusion. Picture yourself climbing a mountain in a dream. Step by step, you move upward, and the higher you go, the better you feel. But suddenly, you wake up and realize your legs never moved. You felt the effort, the pride, even the sweat, but you're still exactly where you started. This is the false progress illusion. We often confuse activity with progress. Checking off minor tasks, organizing our workspace, or reading about productivity tricks can give us the comforting illusion that we're moving forward. But real growth demands deeper effort steps that are often slow, uncomfortable, and unseen. Our brains love the feeling of progress. Even the sound of a ding when we complete a task gives us a little dopamine hit. We crave it. But the trap here is that we may keep choosing easy wins, avoiding the true mountain altogether, like polishing the gear instead of climbing. This illusion also appears in relationships. Saying the right words, giving surface-level apologies, or sharing quotes about love can feel like steps toward healing. But true progress often comes in silence, in deep listening, in changing how we show up again and again. To escape this trap, we must ask, am I just moving, or am I moving in the right direction? True progress often lacks applause. It's found in quiet persistence, in uncomfortable honesty, and in letting go of the need to always feel good about where we are. Inner voice deception. Imagine a voice inside your head that sounds exactly like you, calm, familiar, even wise. But sometimes it whispers lies. It says, you're not good enough, that everyone else is ahead. That trying is pointless. And because the voice sounds like your own, you believe it. This is the inner voice deception. We all have an inner narrator. It helps us understand the world, make decisions, and reflect on ourselves. But this voice is shaped by our past experiences, fears, insecurities, and the beliefs we've unknowingly picked up. Sometimes it becomes an inner critic, repeating doubts that no longer serve us. The danger of this trap lies in its familiarity. When a stranger criticizes us, we can argue back. But when the criticism comes from within, it feels like truth. We accept its judgment without question. This can lead to hesitation, low confidence, or a constant feeling of not being enough. Think of the voice as a radio station. You've been tuned in for so long, you forget it's not the only channel. But what if you could question it? What if you could respond to it not with belief, but with curiosity? Whose voice is this really? Where did I first hear this? Building a healthy inner voice takes time. It begins with awareness. By noticing when your inner dialogue turns dark or critical, you begin to separate yourself from it. You realize you are not your thoughts. You are the space in which those thoughts echo. The Predictability Paradox. Imagine a life where you know everything that will happen, every conversation, every outcome, every surprise already written in stone. At first, it feels peaceful, safe. But slowly, boredom creeps in, then unease, then despair. Because without uncertainty, life becomes a lifeless loop. This is the Predictability Paradox. Our brains are wired to seek patterns. Predictability gives us comfort. It helps us plan, prepare, and avoid danger. But when things become too predictable, we lose the spark that makes life feel alive. Like reading a mystery novel where you already know the ending. This paradox is felt in daily life. We chase routines to feel in control, but then feel trapped by the sameness. We want relationships to feel stable, but complain when they lose their excitement. We seek careers with steady paths, then wonder why we feel unfulfilled. The trap here is that in trying to avoid discomfort, we also avoid growth. True moments of transformation often begin in uncertainty. A new choice, a risk, a conversation that breaks the pattern. These are the places where aliveness returns. To live fully, we must learn to dance with unpredictability, not fear it. Life doesn't need to be chaotic, but it does need room for mystery, for surprise, for the unknown to walk in and change us. Controlled delusion. Picture holding the reins of a great chariot, racing through storms. You pull left, you pull right, trying to steer your fate. But as you look closer, you realize the reins are not connected to anything. This is the control delusion. We love the idea of control. It makes us feel powerful, responsible, safe. We plan our days, set our goals, try to manage others, and shape the future. But much of life remains outside our hands: weather, health, chance encounters, other people's choices. The illusion of control is comforting, but it can also be cruel. When things go wrong, we blame ourselves. We think we failed because we didn't try hard enough or plan better. But often, it wasn't ours to control in the first place. Letting go of this delusion doesn't mean giving up. It means shifting focus from outcome to effort, from control to response, from perfection to presence. It means doing your best and releasing what lies beyond your reach. When we stop trying to control everything, we begin to trust. ourselves, others, and the unfolding of life. And in that trust, we find peace. Mood-driven memory. Imagine flipping through a photo album while feeling sad. Suddenly, every image seems tinted with blue. Moments that were once joyful now appear distant, incomplete. This is the trap of mood-driven memory. Our emotional state at the moment of remembering can influence how we recall the past. When we're happy, we remember more positive moments. When we're anxious or upset, our brain digs up similar feelings from the archive. This creates a loop. A bad mood can pull up painful memories, which deepen the mood, which then leads to more dark memories. We begin to believe that things have always been this way, even if they haven't. This trap clouds our sense of self. A single failure can make us forget all the times we succeeded. One heartbreak can make it seem like love never worked. One anxious thought can erase all the calm that came before. To escape, we must remember that memory is not a mirror. It is a painting, and mood is the brush. We can learn to step back and ask, what else is true? What might I be forgetting in this state? Practices like journaling, talking with others, or even revisiting old photos with fresh eyes can help restore balance. Memory is shaped by emotion, but it doesn't have to be trapped by it. Each of these traps, from emotional carryover to mood-tinted memory, reminds us of one simple truth. The mind is powerful, but not always accurate. And with gentle awareness, we can begin to see clearly again. Filter fragility. Imagine you're watching the world through a fragile glass window. It's not broken, but it's thin, so thin that any new piece of information, any sudden emotion, or any surprising opinion can shake it. This is filter fragility, the hidden tendency to only accept views that match your own mental lens and to resist anything that doesn't. It's not stubbornness. It's a quiet, unconscious defense. We all have mental filters. We build them over years, shaped by culture, upbringing, past experiences, and repeated beliefs. These filters help us process the overload of information we face every day. But when those filters become too rigid, too fragile, can no longer adapt. We reject uncomfortable truths, avoid new perspectives, and protect the self-image we've grown used to. You might have seen this in someone who instantly dismisses a different political view or shuts down when challenged. Or maybe you've felt it yourself when reading a book or hearing a story that contradicts what you've always believed. Instead of exploring it, your mind quietly puts up a wall. Filter fragility isn't loud. It doesn't argue. It just subtly says, let's not go there. But true growth begins when we allow our filters to flex, when we make space for discomfort and stay curious about things that unsettle us, like a window that's strong enough to open, not just reflect. Reflection bias. Imagine standing in front of a mirror that doesn't show who you are right now, but who you were a week ago, a month ago, or even a year ago. This is the world of reflection bias. The quiet illusion that our current self, choices, and judgments are more consistent with our past than they really are. Your brain likes a tidy story. It wants to believe that you've always thought the way you think now. But in truth, we shift, we evolve. And yet, when you reflect on past decisions, the mind often rewrites the narrative to match who you are today. That's why we sometimes say, I always knew this would happen, even when we didn't. Reflection bias can make us overconfident in our memory and less open to feedback. It convinces us that we were more certain, more wise, more prepared than we actually were. It blurs our ability to see how we've changed and how others have too. Letting go of this bias means accepting that the self is a moving river, not a fixed statue. We grow not just forward, but also backward when we re-examine our stories with honesty. Phantom truth effect. Imagine hearing a lie once and brushing it off, but then you hear it again and again, and without realizing, it starts to feel true. This is the phantom truth effect, the strange way repeated exposure to falsehood can make it feel real. It doesn't matter if you know it's wrong. It doesn't even matter if you're usually skeptical. The brain is wired to favor familiarity. So the more you hear something, even if it's untrue, the more your mental alarms begin to lower. This is how myths spread, how fake news thrives, how stories gain power not because they're right but because they're repeated. We're especially vulnerable when tired, distracted, or emotionally triggered. And in today's echo chambers of constant headlines and recycled opinions, the phantom truth effect is more active than ever. To defend against it, pause before you accept what sounds familiar. Ask, do I believe this because it's truer just because I've heard it before? Goalpost Shift. Imagine running a race where the finish line keeps moving just as you're about to reach it. This is the trap of goalpost shift, the tendency to constantly raise the standards of success once progress is made. Maybe you aimed to get fit, and once you did, you felt it wasn't enough, you now needed abs. Or you landed the job you dreamed of, but then you told yourself you wouldn't be truly successful until you were promoted. It's a subtle game our minds play that keeps satisfaction always just out of reach. This trap can be useful when pushing for growth, but unchecked it creates endless discontent. It turns progress into pressure and joy into a moving target. To break free, recognize the difference between healthy ambition and chronic dissatisfaction. Celebrate the finish lines you once dreamed off even if they're no longer where your eyes rest. Influence leak. Imagine you're walking through a room full of whispers. None of them are directed at you, but slowly they start to shape your thoughts. This is influence leak, the silent way external cues and unnoticed voices seep into our beliefs, decisions, and moods. You might think you're making independent choices, but often you're echoing someone else's mood, mimicking their tone, or subtly adopting their point of view without realizing. Social media, advertisements, conversations, they leave fingerprints on our thoughts, even if we don't feel the touch. Influence leak thrives in moments of fatigue and distraction. The brain, trying to conserve energy, picks up cues from the environment and integrates them into decision-making. Over time, we confuse borrowed beliefs with our own. To resist this leak, slow down. Ask yourself, is this thought mine? And in that small space of awareness, reclaim your mind. Spotlight tunnel. Imagine standing under a single spotlight in a vast theater. All you can see is what the beam illuminates while the rest fades into shadow. This is spotlight tunnel, the tendency to overfocus on one part of a situation while ignoring the broader picture. In moments of stress or attention, we narrow our awareness. One comment from a friend becomes the entire conversation. One mistake becomes your whole day. One fear takes over your whole future. Spotlight tunnel helps you survive urgent moments, but it warps your sense of proportion. It makes the present feel like forever, and the one detail feel like the whole truth. To step out of the tunnel, practice zooming out. Ask, what am I not seeing right now? Often, the light isn't lying, it's just incomplete. Mental framing fog. Imagine placing a picture in a crooked frame. No matter how beautiful the image, it will always look off. This is mental framing fog, the way your interpretation of a situation is shaped by the frame you put around it. If you frame a challenge as a threat, it triggers fear. Frame it as a lesson, and it sparks curiosity. The event doesn't change, only your frame does. But here's the catch. We rarely notice we're even framing at all. Our brains use frames to simplify. But when the frame is wrong, rigid, it distorts reality. Mental framing fog keeps you trapped in old stories and prevents you from seeing new angles. To clear the fog, shift the frame. Try asking, what if I saw this differently? That question alone can turn stress into strength. Outcome illusion trap. Imagine flipping a coin 10 times and getting heads each time. You might feel like you've mastered the flipper, that fate favors you. This is outcome illusion trap, the belief that a good result always means a good decision, and a bad result always means a mistake. It's tempting to judge choices by their outcomes, But life is filled with randomness, and sometimes the wrong decision can lead to a lucky win. Other times, a wise move can still go badly. When we tie our self-worth to outcomes alone, we build our confidence on unstable ground. True growth comes from evaluating the process, not just the result. Ask, did I choose wisely with what I knew? That reflection matters more than whether you got heads or tails. Pattern urge. Imagine sitting in a quiet room, gazing at the ceiling. A flickering shadow from the window dances across the wall. You see it once, then again, and soon your mind begins to predict its movement. You feel as if you know where it will go next. There's comfort in that, familiarity. But what if that comfort is a trap? Pattern urge is our deep need to find order and meaning even when none exists. It's an evolutionary gift that helped our ancestors spot predators in the bushes and recognize dangerous trends in nature. But in today's world, this same instinct often leads us astray. We start to see faces in clouds, symbols in coincidences, and connections in events that are purely random. A series of bad days becomes a curse. A stranger glancing at us twice is now someone with secret intent. We construct patterns to bring certainty, even when life is uncertain by nature. This trap can lead us to believe in false narratives. In relationships, we may misread silence as a pattern of neglect. In careers, we might interpret isolated setbacks as signs of failure. In our quest to find meaning, we often impose structure on chaos, creating unnecessary fear or false hope. To live mindfully is to recognize when your mind is trying to make sense of things that might not need explanation. Ask yourself, is this truly a pattern, or am I just trying to feel in control? Because sometimes peace lies not in discovering patterns, but in accepting randomness. Dream anchoring bias. Picture waking from a vivid dream. It felt so real, so intense, that it lingers even as you brush your teeth and pour your coffee. You can't shake it off. You interpret the dream like a message, a prophecy, or even a warning. This is the dream anchoring bias, the tendency to let our dreams heavily influence our mood, thoughts, and decisions in waking life. Our dreams become mental anchors, deeply affecting how we perceive real events. A nightmare about a friend might make us distant the next day. A dream of success might embolden us. We let something imagined set the tone for what is real. Our subconscious takes the wheel, quietly steering our emotions. But dreams are not messages. They're mental puzzles your brain, untangling the day's thoughts, memories, and feelings. Yet when we anchor our reality to these fleeting stories, we blur the line between what is and what merely felt real in sleep. The mind is powerful, but even it struggles to distinguish between memory and imagination. That's why the dream anchoring bias can be so deceptive. To navigate this trap, remind yourself, dreams are not prophecies. They are echoes of your inner world, not scripts for your outer one. Wake gently, acknowledge the dream, but walk forward with your eyes wide open. Authenticity, confusion. Imagine you're at a dinner party. Everyone is sharing stories, laughing, playing their part. You begin to wonder, am I being myself right now, or just playing a role to fit in? Authenticity confusion is that unsettling moment when you question your own identity in social settings. It's not about being fake, it's about not being sure who the real you even is. We all adjust ourselves slightly depending on where we are, more formal at work, more playful with friends. This flexibility is normal, but when the shift feels like a performance, it breeds confusion. We start to chase authenticity as if it's a fixed, perfect version of ourselves. But in truth, the self is fluid, changing, growing. The idea that there is one true self-unchanging pure's a myth. What feels real is often what feels aligned with our values in that moment. So when you feel lost in your own reflection, remind yourself, you are not one fixed note. You are a song still being composed. It's okay to sound different in different rooms. Being authentic doesn't mean being the same all the time. It means being honest about who you are right now. Suspense bias. Picture reading a book late at night. The plot thickens. The twist is near you, can't stop turning the pages. You feel alive, engaged, trapped in the suspense. Suspense bias is the mind's tendency to prioritize unresolved situations. We focus more on what's uncertain rather than what's already known or resolved. The cliffhanger becomes more important than the chapter we just finished. This is why we worry over texts left on read or overanalyze silence after an interview. Our brains are wired to close loops, and when they're left open, our minds fixate. But this fixation isn't always helpful. It can lead to overthinking, sleepless nights, or distorted judgment. We inflate the importance of the unknown simply because it's unresolved. Understanding suspense bias helps us step back. Not every unanswered question is a crisis. Some things take time to unfold. Not all loops need to be closed immediately. So the next time your mind is consumed by what-ifs, breathe. Let the story unfold at its own pace. Peace lives in patience. Recall shift trap. Imagine trying to remember a childhood moment. At first, it's vague: a smell, a color, a laugh. But each time you recall it, the memory feels more vivid. You add details. You're sure they're real. This is the recall shift trap, the idea that each act of remembering changes the memory itself. We believe memory is like a recording. In reality, it's more like clay-shaped each time we touch it. Our memories are not perfect vaults. They are stories told by a narrator who edits with each retelling. The more we revisit a moment, the more it drifts from its original form. This has deep implications. In arguments, we may remember ourselves as kinder or others as harsher. In nostalgia, we may polish the past, forgetting its rough edges. And in pain, we may deepen wounds that once were smaller. To protect truth, we must question even our own memories. Accept their beauty, but also their fragility. Because the mind, though powerful, often prefers a good story over an accurate one. Certainty, craving loop. Imagine you're walking through a dense fog, unable to see what lies even a few steps ahead. Every direction seems unfamiliar, each sound amplified by the unknown. Now, imagine someone appears and hands you a map. It might not be perfect, but it gives you a direction. You cling to it, not because it's accurate, but because it provides relief from uncertainty. This is the essence of the certainty craving loop. Our minds are wired to crave clarity. When answers are absent, we often invent them just to feel at ease. This psychological trap leads us to accept comforting explanations over true ones, to believe things not because they're proven, but because they satisfy our need for predictability. It's why conspiracy theories thrive during crises, and why we often cling to first impressions. The loop begins with discomfort. Our brains view ambiguity as a threat, triggering anxiety. To soothe ourselves, we fill in the blanks, jumping to conclusions, leaning on stereotypes, or accepting familiar narratives. The relief feels good, so we repeat it, over and over, until we've built a worldview made more from convenience than truth. But the loop has a cost. It blocks curiosity, resists new information, and builds rigid thinking. Escaping it means learning to sit with not knowing. To say, I don't have all the answers and that's okay. In that space, wisdom grows. The mind becomes open again, not because it's certain, but because it's strong enough to question. Meaning imposition bias. Close your eyes and picture clouds drifting across the sky. Now imagine one of them looks like a dragon, another, a ship. None of these forms are real, but your mind can't help but shape patterns. Now apply that instinct to life itself. You lose your job, maybe it's a sign. A stranger smiles at you. Perhaps fate is guiding me. This is meaning imposition bias. We are storytellers by nature. We seek purpose and connection, even where there may be none. This bias compels us to construct meaning around random events, finding signs and symbols in the mundane. It offers comfort, especially during times of chaos. Believing that things happen for a reason helps us feel like life is understandable, controllable. But not every cloud is a dragon. Not every hardship is a lesson from the universe. When we impose meaning too quickly, we risk misunderstanding reality. We become prisoners of narratives that may soothe us but also mislead us. Sometimes pain is just pain. Sometimes coincidence is just that. To loosen the grip of this bias, we must pause and ask, is this interpretation serving me or trapping me? Learning to observe life without rushing to label it gives us space for true insight, born not from imposed meaning, but from thoughtful understanding. The guilt lag. Think back to a moment when you said or did something that didn't sit right with you. Maybe it was a harsh word, a neglected promise, or a decision made too quickly. Days pass. Life moves on, but suddenly, like a delayed echo, guilt resurfaces. It lingers not when the event occurred, but long after. This is the guilt lag. The guilt lag refers to how our emotional responses don't always align with time. We may act without reflection, but days or weeks later, as we process the implications, guilt creeps in. It arrives late sometimes when we least expect it, and settles heavily. This trap makes it hard to forgive ourselves, even after we've grown. We replay old scenarios with new understanding, judging our past selves by today's awareness. It can distort our perception of who we are, locking us in cycles of self-doubt. But guilt, though painful, also points to growth. It shows that we now see more clearly. The key is to respond with compassion, acknowledge the lesson without letting it define us. Just as a wound heals over time, our missteps deserve healing too. The choice illusion. You walk into a cafe with dozens of drinks on the menu. The sheer variety feels empowering until you place your order and leave wondering if you made the right choice. Was there a better one? Should you have picked differently? This spiral is the choice illusion. We often equate more options with more freedom. But psychology shows that too much choice can lead to paralysis, regret, and dissatisfaction. The illusion is that with endless options, we'll find the perfect one. But perfection is a mirage. This trap thrives in modern life. We swipe through countless profiles, browse endless products, and constantly compare. We fear missing out, so we hesitate. Or worse, we decide and then doubt. The truth is, happiness rarely depends on the choice itself, but on how we engage with it. The more present we are in our decisions, the more fulfilled we feel. Escaping the illusion means letting go of perfection and embracing contentment. Trust echo trap. Imagine walking into a room where everyone nods in agreement to whatever you say. It feels good, reassuring, even validating. But over time, you begin to hear only your own thoughts reflected back at you. No challenges, no new ideas. This is the trust echo trap. We tend to trust those who affirm us, who sound like us, who agree with our views. This trust becomes a loop, echoing back our own beliefs, shielding us from discomfort. But when all we hear are familiar echoes, our world narrows. We stop questioning. We stop growing. The trap lies in confusing comfort with truth. Real trust involves challenge. It's built not only on agreement, but on honesty. To escape the echo, we must seek diverse voices, ask hard questions, and be willing to sit with dissonance. True growth begins where the echo ends. Silent agreement bias. Imagine you're sitting in a quiet room among a group of people. A discussion is taking place, but your lips remain sealed. You nod slightly, you smile when appropriate, and you avoid conflict. Not because you agree, but because silence is easier. This is the silent agreement bias. The silent agreement bias is a subtle psychological trap where individuals interpret silence or lack of objection as agreement or support. it's not always about fear. Often, it's about comfort, about the avoidance of friction. When others around us express strong opinions, we sometimes stay quiet not because we agree, but because challenging the consensus feels exhausting. But what happens when too many people think the same way? History has shown that silence can be louder than speech. In moments of injustice, when crowds stood by, when voices went unheard, the silence itself became a verdict. In our daily lives, it often plays out in meetings, in group chats, or during family gatherings where we suppress our true thoughts to preserve the peace. We tell ourselves it's not worth the trouble. But here's the trap. When silence is interpreted as consent, it shapes future behavior. The louder voice grows stronger, more validated. The silent ones slowly lose influence not just in others' eyes, but within their own. Their thoughts remain unshared, their presence quietly shrinking. Over time, this silence doesn't protect. It isolates. It weakens the muscle of expression. And so, we begin to forget how to speak up even when it matters. The bias feeds itself, until silence feels like the only option left. To escape this loop, we must ask ourselves, are we silent because we agree or because it's easier? True clarity comes not from shouting opinions, but from speaking when it counts, calmly, deliberately. Breaking silence is not about confrontation. It's about presence. It's about refusing to disappear in the background of someone else's narrative. The next time you're in a room filled with voices and you feel the urge to stay silent, pause. Ask yourself, what truth are you holding back? And what world are you allowing to shape itself in your silence? Familiar pattern addiction. Imagine you're walking through a forest. You see two paths sown, well-trodden, smooth, and familiar. The other is overgrown, mysterious, and unmarked. Almost without thinking, your feet move toward the familiar trail. Not because it's better, but because you've walked it before. This is the essence of familiar pattern addiction. Our brains are built for efficiency. When a pattern proves safe, we return to it even if it's outdated, unhelpful, or harmful. This trap isn't about logic. It's about comfort. It's about the mind's quiet craving for predictability. In relationships, this might look like returning to the same kind of partner who reminds us of someone from our past. In work, it could be sticking to methods that no longer work. Even in our habits, we often repeat routines just because they're familiar. Change threatens the stability our minds have grown used to. The trap deepens when we begin to conflate familiarity with safety. We tell ourselves, I've survived this path before, so it must be right. But survival doesn't equal fulfillment. Familiarity does not equal truth. We fall into this bias most often during times of stress. When the unknown feels overwhelming, we anchor to what we know, and slowly it becomes harder to see any other way. We become addicted to the known even when it limits us. Breaking free starts with one brave step into the unknown. It's the moment we choose the overgrown path. It's trying something different, even if it feels strange. It's noticing when we're repeating not because it's right, but because it's easy. Ask yourself, are your current patterns serving your growth or simply protecting your fears? If you've been walking the same road again and again, maybe it's time to wonder what lies beyond the bend. The validation loop. Picture this. You're scrolling through your favorite social media app. You post a thought, an image, a part of yourself, and then you wait. A like, a heart, a comment. That brief rush of approval makes your breath a little lighter. You smile. But soon, the rush fades, and you need it again. This is the validation loop. At its core, the validation loop is a psychological pattern where external approval becomes the primary measure of self-worth. It's a cycle built on dependence where the inner self gets quiet and the outer world takes the mic. It starts harmlessly. A compliment from a friend, applause after a presentation. Recognition feels good, it's human. But over time, the need for validation can grow. We begin to shape our choices around what gets noticed, liked, or praised. Slowly, the authentic self is replaced by a curated version designed to please others. The loop tightens when silence feels like rejection, when one post doesn't get enough likes, when feedback doesn't come. Our minds whisper, "Was it not good enough? Am I not enough?" This trap is dangerous because it blinds us to internal validation, the deep knowing that we are worthy, regardless of who claps for us. And in its absence, even praise starts to feel hollow because it never lasts. Escaping the validation loop isn't about rejecting praise. It's about disconnecting your worth from it. It's about asking, would I still choose this if no one ever saw it? To truly be free is to live from the inside out, not from the reaction in. Create not for applause, but for alignment. Speak not to be praised, but to be honest. Choose what lights your soul, even if the world is watching something else. Remember, you are not your likes. You are not your applause. You are not your comments. You are the one who exists when the screen turns off and the crowd disappears. And that person, that quiet, breathing, unseen self is already whole. Decision weight fog. Imagine you're standing in the middle of a quiet forest, holding a map that's half erased. You know you need to move forward, but the paths ahead are hidden in mist. Each step feels uncertain. Some routes seem risky, others oddly familiar. The longer you stare at the map, the harder it is to move. That stillness, that hesitation, that's the feeling behind the decision weight fog. This psychological trap plays tricks on our ability to weigh choices fairly. When faced with multiple decisions, we tend to give too much weight to specific factorsally ones that are vivid, recent, or emotionally charged while overlooking others that might be just as important. It's not that we're lazy, it's that our brains are wired to conserve energy, but this shortcut often misleads us. For example, imagine someone trying to decide between two jobs. One offers slightly more money, but a toxic environment. The other offers balance and peace, but a modest salary. If they've recently seen headlines about inflation and rising costs, their brain might amplify the value of money in the decision even if their long-term happiness lies elsewhere. The fog sets in. Clarity fades. Decision weight fog is common in daily life. When we buy something expensive, we focus on the discount rather than the final cost. When we hear a story of someone failing, we focus on their mistakes instead of the system around them. Our minds assign weights where none may belong. Over time, these distorted calculations can lead us to paths that don't align with our values. The way out? It begins with awareness. Step back. Ask yourself, am I overvaluing something just because it's louder in my mind? Can I pause long enough to let the fog lift, to see the whole map clearly? In this quiet pause lies the return of control. Not over the world, but over how we move through it. Projection bias. Picture this. You're looking out of a clear glass window, trying to see the world as it is. But the glass is tinted, colored by your own emotions and expectations. You think you're seeing others clearly, but really you're seeing a version of them shaped by your current state of mind. This is the essence of projection bias. Projection bias is the tendency to assume that others think, feel, or believe the same way we do, that our future selves will feel the same as we do now. It's like wearing emotional lenses and forgetting they're there. When we're happy, we expect our future to be happy. When we're tired or angry, we assume decisions made in that moment reflect how we'll feel later. But moods shift, feelings fade, and we're often wrong. Think about someone shopping for groceries while hungry. They overbuy, believing they'll always want that much food. Or someone making long-term commitments when they're euphoric, underestimating the possibility of change. In relationships, projection bias can lead to misunderstandings. We expect people to react the way we would to appreciate what we'd appreciate, to hurt where we'd hurt. When they don't, it feels like betrayal, but it's often just difference. Escaping this trap begins with a simple truth. People are not us. Our future self is not today's self. Others have their own thoughts, shaped by different stories. So the next time you catch yourself thinking, they must be thinking what I'm thinking, pause. Ask, what if they're not? In that pause, the world opens up, not as a mirror, but as a mystery worth exploring. Thought rehearsal trap. Imagine a theater, empty and silent. The stage lights are dim, but in your mind the performance is already in motion. You're running through lines, imagining the reactions, the failures, the applause. Over and over, the scene replays not in real life, but in the mind's private rehearsal hall. This is the thought rehearsal trap. Our brains love to simulate. We plan, prepare, and anticipate. It's one of our greatest strengths. But sometimes, the rehearsal never ends. We think about a conversation so much that we feel like we've already had it. We imagine a disaster so vividly that it feels real. We play out scenarios, again and again, until the thinking becomes exhausting. This trap gives us a false sense of action. It tricks us into believing we're doing something productive. But there's a difference between preparation and obsession. Rehearsing every possibility doesn't make us more ready. It makes us more anxious. Life is unpredictable, and no amount of mental practice can script it perfectly. The way out begins with noticing the cycle. Are you planning, or are you replaying? Are you preparing, or are you drowning in what-ifs? Sometimes the bravest step is to stop rehearsing and start acting. To let the scene unfold without trying to control every line. Because real life, with all its surprises, is often better than the script we write in fear. Identity habit bias. Imagine wearing a name tag not just with your name, but with every belief, role, and label you've carried through life. Student, parent, artist, overachiever, peacemaker. Each tag is familiar, comfortable. You've worn them for so long, you forget they were once choices. This is where identity habit bias comes in. This psychological trap is the tendency to cling to our past identities, even when they no longer serve us. We build routines around who we believe we are, and slowly, those beliefs become cages. If you've always seen yourself as the quiet one, you may hesitate to speak even when you have something powerful to say. If you've been praised for being dependable, you might overextend yourself just to keep that image intact. Our minds prefer consistency. It feels safe. But growth often requires change, and changing our identity, even slightly, can feel like letting go of a part of ourselves. Yet, what if you could be more than one thing? What if identities were not walls, but windows, ways of seeing, not definitions of being? To escape this trap, start by asking, who am I when no one is watching? What parts of me feel real, and what parts feel rehearsed? Growth begins when we question the labels we've accepted, when we realize that who we are is not fixed, but flowing, and that it's okay to change the name tag. You are not the roles you've played. You are the awareness behind them, and that awareness is always free to evolve. Time slip illusion. Imagine waking up in a quiet room, surrounded by soft light filtering through the curtains. The clock ticks steadily, yet you can't quite tell if it's morning or evening. Time feels different, stretched, or maybe compressed. You look back at the last hour, and somehow you can't remember what you were doing. You were awake, alert, even busy, but now it's as if the past hour has vanished into mist. This feeling, strange and disorienting, is what we call the time slip illusion. The mind has a complicated relationship with time. We think of it as a constant stream, moving from moment to moment in a straight line, but our experience of time is far from consistent. Sometimes, a day can feel like a minute. At other times, a minute can feel like an hour. The time slip illusion happens when our perception of time doesn't align with actual time. It can occur during repetitive tasks, in deep thought, or even during emotional moments where the brain rewires how it marks the passage of time. What's fascinating is that this illusion isn't just about memory or awareness. It's about how the brain filters experience. When something is overly familiar, the brain saves energy by reducing how much attention it pays. This reduced attention can distort our sense of time. It's like walking through a fog. You're still moving forward, but everything looks the same, and it's hard to know how far you've come. In quiet reflection, you begin to wonder how many moments have slipped away, unnoticed. How much of your life has been lived on autopilot, the minutes folded into themselves like pages in a book you forgot you were reading. The time slip illusion gently reminds us to return to the present, to slow down and feel each breath, to stretch open each moment so it doesn't vanish into the blur. Meaning overload trap. Now imagine sitting in a room filled with whispers. Each whisper speaks a different thought. Some are memories, some are plans, some are fears, others are dreams. At first, you try to listen to them all, but soon it becomes too much. Your mind begins to ache, trying to give meaning to everything at once. This is the meaning overload trap. Humans are meaning-making creatures. We look for patterns, connections, and explanations. It's how we understand the world and our place in it. But this strength can also become a trap. When we assign too much meaning to everything, every gesture, every silence, every event, we risk drowning in interpretation. Every smile hides a motive. Every coincidence becomes a sign. Every word echoes with hidden weight. This trap often appears in times of uncertainty. When life feels chaotic or out of control, the brain compensates by seeking meaning where there may be none. It's a comforting illusion, but a dangerous one. Because not everything has a reason, not every moment is a message, and not every question has an answer. When trapped in meaning overload, even rest becomes difficult. The mind refuses to quiet down. It spins stories and theories and what-ifs. The world becomes heavy, not because of what's happening, but because of how much weight we place on it. Sometimes, peace comes from letting go of the need to know, letting go of the pressure to understand, letting moments simply be without wrapping them in explanation. In the quiet space that follows, we find clarity, not through meaning, but through presence. Fragmentation Effect. Imagine trying to read a book, but each page is torn into pieces. You try to put the pieces together, but just as you begin to understand one part, your attention is pulled to another. You jump from idea to idea, but nothing sticks. At the end, you've read for hours, but absorbed very little. This is the fragmentation effect. In today's fast-paced world, attention is constantly under attack. Notifications, distractions, endless content, these all chip away at our focus. Over time, this creates a fragmented mind, one that moves rapidly but rarely deeply. We begin tasks, conversations, even thoughts, but finish few of them. We remember fragments of experiences, but not the whole. The fragmentation effect isn't just about external distraction. Internally, our thoughts become scattered. The mind moves in short bursts. Long, flowing focus becomes rare. We multitask, not realizing that with each switch, we lose a little more of ourselves in the gaps. The effect is subtle, but powerful. It leaves us feeling busy, but unfulfilled, tired, but restless. And in those quiet moments before sleep, the scattered thoughts rush in like wind through broken windows. Healing from fragmentation begins with slowness, with allowing thoughts to stretch and settle, with finishing one thing before beginning another. It's about choosing depth over speed, presence over performance. In time, the mind learns to weave again, to gather the pieces, and stitch them into something whole. Isolation echo. Picture yourself in a vast canyon. You shout into the emptiness, and your voice returns, but only your own. Again and again you call out, but the only answer is yourself. The longer you remain, the louder your voice seems to grow, but not because it's being heard. This is the isolation echo. When we're isolated physically, emotionally, or mental, your thoughts begin to loop. We seek connection, But without others to reflect our ideas, we become our own echo chamber. Our worries repeat. Our self-doubt grows. Even our confidence can inflate, unchecked by outside perspective. Isolation doesn't always mean loneliness. One can be surrounded by people and still feel isolated if their voice isn't truly heard. Over time, the echo becomes louder than reality. We assume others think what we think, that they judge us as harshly as we judge ourselves, or that our beliefs must be right because we've never heard them challenged. The danger of the isolation echo lies in its comfort. It's safe, predictable, but it also stifles growth. It's through interaction, disagreement, and shared silence that we find balance. Breaking the echo requires courage, the courage to reach out, to listen, to be seen. Not every connection will echo back kindly, but even the difficult ones offer truth. And truth, however it sounds, is better than the illusion of your own voice bouncing endlessly in the dark. Attention magnet effect. Now imagine walking through a garden filled with flowers of every color, yet your eyes are drawn only to the brightest red one. Again and again, you return to it, ignoring the rest. The attention magnet effect works like this. It pulls us towards certain stimuli loud, flashy, emotional while the subtle and quiet fade into the background. This trap plays on the way the brain is wired. We're built to notice what stands out: movement, sound, color, danger. It kept us alive in ancient times. But in today's world, attention magnets are everywhere: news headlines, social media posts, emotional triggers. They pull our focus again and again, regardless of relevance. Over time, this can warp our understanding of reality. We begin to believe that what's most visible is what's most important. We chase urgency instead of meaning. We mistake noise for truth. The attention magnet effect also feeds on emotion. What angers us, excites us, or shocks us grabs hold tightly. Even when we know better, our focus keeps returning to it. To escape, we must practice deliberate attention. To choose where we look, not just react to what pulls us. Like walking through the garden again, this time noticing the blue, the yellow, the soft green leaves in the shade. In doing so, we reclaim our mind not by avoiding attention magnets, but by gently reminding ourselves that we don't have to follow them. Influence. Anchoring. Imagine you're walking through a museum filled with mirrors. Each mirror doesn't reflect your image directly. Instead, it slightly distorts, subtly reshapes, or quietly stretches your features. You walk past them slowly, unaware that every reflection is leaving a mark on how you see yourself. This is influence anchoring. The mind's tendency to hold on to the first piece of information or judgment it encounters sand, use it as the base for all that follows. Picture a child hearing, for the first time, that they aren't good at drawing. That thought anchors itself in their mind. Even as they grow, they hesitate to pick up a pencil not because they lack talent, but because that single comment became their mental anchor. Whether it's the first price you hear in a negotiation, the first impression you have of a person, or the first belief you hold about a topic, it latches deep. This trap isn't about loud opinions or deliberate lies. It's about quiet beginnings that hold weight over time. Anchoring is subtle, and that's why it's so powerful. The first detail you absorb becomes the mental yardstick against which all other ideas are compared. The real challenge is awareness. Understanding that your current decision might not be purely rational, but built on a quiet echo from the past. To escape this, pause. Ask yourself, what is this opinion built upon? Who or what set the original anchor? In asking, you loosen the grip it holds. Self-story trap. Imagine you're handed a book. On the cover it reads, "The Story of You." You open it, and every page is filled with tales you've told yourself. Memories, assumptions, beliefs, fears. Some of them are true. Others? Crafted over time, exaggerated, softened, or edited to fit a narrative. This is the self-story trap, the unconscious commitment we make to the story we think defines us. Perhaps one day you failed at something important, and over time, that became the chapter titled, "I'm Not Meant for Success." Or maybe someone once called you kind, and now you hesitate to speak up in fear of losing that identity. These stories become mental chains, not because they're necessarily wrong, but because we never question them. The self-story isn't written in stone, yet we treat it as such. We forget we are both the author and the reader. The danger is not in having a story, it's in never revising it. To move past this trap, sit with your story. Ask, whose voice wrote this line? Is it still true today? You'll find that some pages need rewriting, others need closure. And sometimes the bravest act is to leave the next chapter blank, waiting for you to write it freely. Urgency, Mirage. Imagine running through a desert, parched and desperate. In the distance, you see a shimmer water, you think. You run faster, your heartbeat rising, only to find it was a mirage. Now, picture this same chase not for water, but for decisions, purchases, or replies. This is the urgency mirage, the illusion that something must be done now, when in truth, it rarely does. Our brains were wired to respond quickly to threats, but in today's world, marketers, deadlines, and social pressure trigger the same response as false alarms. Only 3 items left. Offer ends tonight. Reply now or risk losing them. These aren't facts. They're illusions designed to push us into fast decisions. The urgency is rarely about time, it's about control. When you feel forced to act quickly, you're less likely to reflect and more likely to fall into patterns. So, what's the antidote? Stillness, breathing, a pause. Ask yourself, what happens if I wait? Often, the urgency fades and clarity arrives. Decisions made in silence often carry more truth than those made in noise. Mental scarcity bias. Imagine you're holding a tiny cup and someone's pouring water into it. You panic, thinking, there's not enough room. Now, imagine that same water, but this time you're by a vast lake with endless space to hold it. The water hasn't changed. Your container has. Mental scarcity bias is the belief that there's not enotomy, energy, love, opportunity, when in fact, there often is. When we feel mentally overwhelmed, it's not always because of too much, but often because of how little we believe we can hold. Scarcity shrinks the mind. It makes us hoard ideas, resist generosity, and live in constant comparison. You see someone else's success and feel like there's less left for you. You hesitate to share a kind word, fearing it might be misunderstood. This bias traps us in a cycle of limitation. But remember, your mental space is not fixed. It can grow, it can stretch, it can adapt. When you challenge the belief that there's not enough, you open yourself to abundancy, not just in things, but in thought, in love, in patience. False neutrality trap. Picture a courtroom where the judge claims to be impartial, but behind the bench they carry silent biases, past experiences, hidden beliefs. Their voice may sound calm, but their choices are already tilted. This is the false neutrality trap, the mistaken belief that our observations, thoughts, or decisions are purely objective. No one is completely neutral. Every thought passes through layers of experience, emotion, and context. Even silence is not always neutral. It can favor the status quo or hide discomfort. You read a news story and think you're processing it logically, yet your past beliefs quietly filter each word. You hear a friend's problem and give advice, unaware that your own life choices shape that guidance. The danger isn't in having bias. It's in pretending we don't. To escape this trap, admit the lens through which you see. Ask, where is this coming from? The more honest you are with yourself, the more you allow true understanding to resonate from a place of false clarity, but from thoughtful awareness. Thought loop confusion. Imagine sitting in a theater watching a play. The curtains rise, the scene begins, but instead of moving forward, the same scene plays again and again. You begin to forget how it started. This is thought loop confusion, the mind's tendency to circle around the same thoughts, unable to escape the pattern. These loops can begin with worry, self-doubt, or past regrets. You think about a mistake, then question why you made it, then recall another, then another until the line between past and present begins to blur. The danger isn't just in repetition. It's in the erosion of clarity. You lose sight of what's real and what's imagined. Decisions become cloudy. Emotions get amplified, and time slips away unnoticed. Breaking the loop doesn't require force, it requires interruption. Change your scenery. Speak the thought aloud. Write it down. Thought loops often thrive in silence. Once exposed, they begin to lose power. Objectivity Illusion. Imagine standing in a room full of mirrors, each one shaped slightly differently. One makes you taller, another shorter. One shows you smiling, another frowning. You believe you're seeing reality, but each mirror only shows a version. This is the objectivity illusion, the belief that we see things as they truly are, when in truth, we always see them through filters. Our minds crave certainty. We want to believe we're fair, balanced, and neutral. But memory is selective. Perception is colored. Emotions seep into logic. And so, objectivity becomes not a lens but a mask. You judge someone's actions, forgetting you're using your own values to do so. You recall an event, but miss how your mood at the time shaped what you remembered. True clarity begins when we doubt our clarity, when we ask, "What might I be missing?" It's not weakness to question your own mind. It's strength. Because behind that question lies a door to deeper awareness and a gentler, truer understanding of the world. Self-reinforcement trap. Imagine planting a seed, and each time it sprouts a little, you praise it. That praise helps it grow, but only in one direction. You ignore the roots. You forget the soil. This is the self-reinforcement trap, the habit of feeding only the beliefs that already comfort or validate us, while ignoring anything that challenges them. We all want to feel right. We seek evidence that supports our ideas, our choices, our worldview. We follow people who agree with us, avoid conversations that challenge us, and celebrate every sign that says, "You were correct." But growth rarely comes from comfort. It comes from tension, from challenge, from pausing to wonder, what if I'm wrong? To escape the trap, invite contradiction, read opposing views, listen to different voices, not to defeat your beliefs, but to refine them, because truth is rarely one-sided, and the self that dares to question itself is the self that grows. The Knowing Fallacy. Imagine sitting in a quiet room, a soft breeze brushing past the window, sunlight casting gentle lines on the floor. You're reading an article on a topic you know well. Halfway through, a statement catches your eye. It's not quite right, but you nod along. Why? Because it sounds familiar. It feels like something you've heard before. You must know it. You think you know it. And so, you stop questioning. This is the knowing fallacy. It's the trap of assuming we understand something simply because we've encountered it before. It preys on our comfort with repetition. We mistake recognition for comprehension and familiarity for depth. The truth? Most of the time, we only know the surface. Think of it like glancing at a book cover repeatedly. Eventually, the cover becomes etched in your memory. You can describe it in detail, but you've never read the pages. You haven't understood the story. Our brains love shortcuts. They are designed to conserve energy. When something looks familiar, we switch off our curiosity and move on. It's efficient, but it also blinds us. In school, you might remember copying the same formulas again and again. They felt familiar. You knew them. But when asked to explain them, your mind went blank. That's the knowing fallacy at work. It hides in everyday life, in politics, in relationships, in science. We skim headlines and think we're informed. We hear a quote and believe we grasp the full idea. We repeat phrases we barely understand. True knowledge is deeper. It invites discomfort. It forces us to ask, do I really understand this? Or does it just sound right? To escape the knowing fallacy, one must slow down. Question everything, even the obvious, especially the obvious. Ask why. Dive deeper. Because real understanding isn't passive. It's active, sometimes frustrating, always rewarding. Idea, ownership, bias. Picture this. You're brainstorming with friends. Ideas are flying across the room. Someone mentions a plan. Later, you repeat it, convinced it was your own. You don't even remember hearing it earlier. You feel proud. But what happened? This is the idea ownership bias. Our minds are complex vaults. Ideas come and go, float and tangle. Often, we absorb thoughts without realizing where they came from. And slowly, they feel like ours. Not by theft, but by mistake. This bias makes us overvalue our own contributions while underestimating others. It creates silent tension in teams, relationships, and even in our internal dialogue. It shows up when we cling tightly to our way, without remembering who planted the seed. It feeds our ego, makes us defensive, resistant to change. When someone criticizes the idea, we take it personally. We don't just attach to ideas, we identify with them, and that can be dangerous. Because when an idea defines us, we stop seeing clearly. We protect the idea, not the truth. To loosen the grip of this bias, we must welcome humility, give credit freely, revisit old thoughts and ask, where did this come from? Be willing to let go, to see ideas as visitors, not possessions. Ideas are rivers, not islands. They flow from one mind to another. We are simply part of the current. Trust Blindspot. Imagine you're walking a forest path. You have a map given to you by a trusted guide. It's helped you before. You trust it. But today it leads you in circles. Still, you follow. You doubt your own eyes before you doubt the map. That's the trust blind spot. We all carry inner maps, beliefs, values, loyalties. They guide us, and we trust them deeply, especially when they come from people we respect, parents, teachers, leaders, friends. So deeply, in fact, that we sometimes ignore evidence right in front of us. When someone we trust makes a mistake, our first reaction isn't to question them. It's to justify them. They must have a reason. They know better than I do. It's probably just a misunderstanding. Trust is vital. But blind trust can be dangerous. This bias shows up when we follow without thinking, when we assume someone has our best interest just because they always have, when we ignore red flags because trust covers them like a fog. To confront this trap, we must balance faith with awareness. Trust people, yes, but verify, observe, be willing to ask questions, even uncomfortable ones. Remember that even the most reliable guide can sometimes lose their way. True trust isn't silent obedience. It's a relationship built on honesty, accountability, and growth. Trust, to be strong, must also allow space for doubt. Quiet conformity. Imagine being in a room where everyone agrees. There's a calmness, a unity, but deep down, something feels off. You disagree, but you stay silent. This is quiet conformity. It's not loud. It doesn't shout. It nods quietly in the corner, blending in. It thrives in meetings, families, societies. It's the pressure to align, not through force, but through stillness. You don't want to rock the boat. You don't want to be that person. So, you smile, you agree, but inside, you're restless. This trap is powerful because silence feels safe and agreement brings comfort. But over time, it erodes individuality, it dulls creativity, it numbs the voice. When everyone thinks the same, no one really thinks at all. Quiet conformity isn't about obedience. It's about fear. Fear of being different. fear of rejection, fear of discomfort. But growth only comes from tension, from contrast, from brave voices saying, "I see it differently." To escape this trap, we must practice small acts of courage, ask questions, share doubts, celebrate differences. Because the world doesn't need more echoes, it needs more truth. Internalized consensus. Imagine a time when you changed your mind, not because of evidence, but because everyone else thinks so. That's internalized consensus. It's the belief that something must be true because it's popular. We take the crowd's opinion and absorb it into our own, not because we've tested it, but because it feels safer to agree. This trap is everywhere. Social media, news cycles, culture. 1,000 voices repeating the same thing can sound like truth. But repetition is not validation. Our brains are wired for belonging. Agreement signals safety. So, we trade critical thinking for acceptance. But truth isn't democratic. It doesn't depend on votes. To break free, we must pause, step back, ask, why do I believe this? Because it makes sense? Or because others do? Truth-seeking is a solitary path. It requires questioning the loudest voices and listening to the quiet ones. Consensus can be comforting, but clarity comes from within. Gratification delay glitch. Imagine standing before two doors. Behind one is a delicious treat you can enjoy right now. Behind the other is a mystery box that promises a greater reward, but only if you can wait. The room is quiet, and the ticking of the clock seems louder than usual. As you stare, your hand moves toward the immediate prize, even though a part of you whispers that patience might be wiser. This moment captures the essence of the gratification delay glitch. Our brains often struggle with the concept of delayed rewards. Even when we logically understand that waiting can lead to better outcomes, something inside us itches for the present, the tangible, the now. It's not just about desserts or gifts, it's about decisions. Should I study tonight or scroll through my feed? Save this money or spend a little joy today? Psychologists have long studied this phenomenon. The famous marshmallow test placed children in a room with a single marshmallow and a promise. Wait a little while, and you'll get two. Some resisted. Others couldn't. Decades later, researchers found that those who delayed gratification tended to have better life outcomes. But here lies the twist. It's not just about willpower. The gratification delay glitch is influenced by trust, context, and experience. If a child doesn't trust that the second marshmallow will come, why wait? In our adult lives, this glitch morphs into endless forms: procrastinating workouts, skipping long-term investments, or chasing fleeting happiness. It reveals the tension between our future selves and the version living in this very moment. The glitch isn't a failure, it's a feature of how we've evolved. In ancient times, immediate action often meant survival. But today, this instinct can cloud long-term clarity. To navigate this trap, we must become aware of the voice that urges us to act now, not to silence it, but to question it gently. Is this truly what I need, or simply what I want right now? Over time, with reflection and consistency, we train our minds to pause, to breathe, and to trust that waiting isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Observation fog. Picture yourself watching a play through a frosted glass window. The actors move, the lights shift, the music swells, but everything is slightly blurred. You see the scene, but you don't grasp the depth. The observation fog surrounds you. This fog is not physical, but psychological. It blurs our perception in real-time interactions. We think we see everything clearly, but we don't. We miss micro-expressions, subtle shifts in tone, or underlying motives. Our brains fill in the blanks with assumptions. It happens when we judge a friend for being distant, not knowing they're carrying a silent burden, or when we assume confidence in someone who's simply masking fear. Observation fog often deepens in familiar settings. With those we know well, our minds lean on past knowledge. We stop observing actively and rely on shortcuts. Ironically, this makes us blind to change. A partner's new silence, a colleague's sudden laughter, they become invisible under the weight of familiarity. The fog also thickens with our emotions. Anger, fear, or excitement narrow our focus. We observe not to understand, but to confirm what we already feel. This selective vision is subtle, but powerful. It shapes misunderstandings, fractures relationships, and clouds decisions. Yet, there's a way through. Slowing down, observing not just what is said, but how it's said. Noticing the pause before the answer, the hesitation behind the smile. It means stepping out of our thoughts and into the present moment. Active listening, mindful awareness, they are tools to lift the fog. True observation requires humility, the acceptance that we might not know everything, that our view is partial. But in this acceptance, clarity begins. The believability bias. Imagine hearing a story that's too shocking to be false. A tale so detailed, so confidently told, that you nod along convinced. Only later do you wonder, was it even true? Welcome to the believability bias. Our minds, in their quest to navigate a noisy world, often equate confidence with truth. The louder the voice, the clearer the narrative, the more we tend to believe. This bias plays out in daily conversations, in news consumption, and especially online. We are drawn to stories, not statistics. Narratives stick because they're emotional, relatable, and vivid. When someone shares a personal account with passion, it bypasses our critical filters. We feel before we think, and if the speaker appears credible, well-dressed, articulate, assertive, our defenses drop further. But believability is not the same as accuracy. A well-told lie feels truer than a poorly explained truth. Politicians, marketers, influencers, many, understand and exploit this bias. They craft compelling messages that align with what we want to believe. In relationships, too, this bias can create illusions. We trust people who sound certain, even if their certainty is unfounded. Doubt, nuance, or hesitation, the hallmarks of real reflection, often seem less persuasive. To navigate the believability bias, we must pause and question. Does this make sense or just feel right? Is this backed by evidence or simply delivered with flair? It doesn't mean becoming cynical. It means becoming thoughtful. Bias of the last word. Think back to a debate, a discussion, or even a disagreement. Do you remember who had the best points? Or do you remember who spoke last? This is the bias of the last word. Our minds, in processing information, often give more weight to what comes last. It's a cousin of the recency effect, the tendency to remember the latest information better than earlier input. But here, it shapes opinions, decisions, and sometimes justice. In arguments, the person who concludes often appears more convincing. Their words linger, echoing in the silence that follows. Even if both sides presented valid points, the final impression sticks. In media, it's the closing statement that sways viewers. In meetings, it's the last idea that feels fresh. This bias affects how we judge people, too. A friend may act poorly all evening, but say something kind at the end, we leave feeling warm. Or, a performer may struggle, then end with brilliance, and we call it a great show. It's not that the last word is always deceptive, but it's disproportionately powerful. Being aware of this helps us step back, to recall the full picture, not just the final brushstroke. In our own words, we can use this bias wisely, ending conversations with kindness, arguments with grace, or speeches with clarity. These can leave meaningful marks. Reflection lag. Imagine tossing a pebble into a calm lake. For a moment, nothing happens. Then, slowly, ripples emerge, spreading across the surface. This delay mirrors the reflection lag, the gap between experience and understanding. We go through events, but their meaning unfolds slowly, sometimes days, sometimes years later. In modern life, this lag is often stretched further. We're always moving, always reacting. There's little time to pause, so emotions linger unprocessed. Insights remain hidden. We feel off, but can't say why. Reflection lag isn't a flaw. It's how deep understanding works. The mind and heart move at different paces. An experience might shake us today, but only make sense next month. A lesson might be taught now, but only truly learned later. This lag can lead to regret, too. We act quickly and reflect slowly. Words said in haste return with weight. Decisions made under pressure unfold their consequences later. Creating space for reflection matters. Quiet walks, journaling, long conversations, they help bridge the lag. They allow the ripples to reach the shore. Life isn't lived in real-time comprehension. It's understood in echoes, in hindsight, in stillness. Honoring the reflection lag is honoring the full rhythm of the human mind. Phantom consequence trap. Imagine you're standing in front of a door that leads to a room you've never seen before. The air is quiet, almost sacred. You hesitate, not because you believe the room is dangerous, but because your mind whispers possibilities of what might happen once you step inside. You imagine embarrassment, regret, or unseen consequences that haven't even occurred yet. And just like that, you take a step back, deciding it's better to stay where you are. This is the phantom consequence trap. It's the quiet voice in our heads that convinces us that invisible dangers lie just beyond our choices. It's the imagined punishment for taking action, for speaking your truth, or for choosing the unfamiliar. Even when there's no evidence, no past experience that justifies fear, the brain constructs elaborate scenarios of consequences that keep us from moving forward. This trap works in silence. Unlike fear, which shouts, the phantom consequence trap whispers. It tells you, what if they don't like it? Or, what if you regret this later? It paints a future with shadows, suggesting that any step into discomfort might lead to irreversible damage. And while you're busy entertaining these thoughts, life continues moving, and opportunities quietly pass you by. You may find yourself not applying for that job, not starting that conversation, or not pursuing a new hobby simply because your mind is feeding you consequences that haven't and might never happen. It's a form of mental self-sabotage masked as caution, and because it's dressed in reason, it often wins. At its core, this trap is rooted in our deep need for safety and control. The brain, in its evolutionary wisdom, always prepares for the worst. Our ancestors survived by imagining danger behind every rustle in the grass. But today, those rustles are emotional risks, not tigers, and yet our minds react the same way. The phantom consequence trap doesn't just keep you safe, it can keep you stuck. It turns life into a series of nearly made choices, conversations left unsaid, and dreams slowly packed away under the label, too risky. To begin freeing yourself from this trap, recognize when you're projecting a future that hasn't happened. Ask yourself, is there real evidence for this fear, or is my mind just trying to protect me from discomfort? When you can answer that honestly, you reclaim a bit of your power. Remember, most of the consequences you fear will never materialize. But the regret of not trying? That has a weight far heavier than the phantom shadows you're trying to avoid. The infinite scroll effect. Picture yourself lying in bed, the room lit only by the soft glow of your phone screen. You tell yourself, just 5 more minutes. You scroll, a meme, a video, a headline. Suddenly, the clock jumps an hour forward. You don't remember what you saw, but you remember not being able to stop. This is the infinite scroll effect. It's a modern psychological trap, engineered by design, that keeps your mind suspended in a loop of shallow engagement. It doesn't ask for your deep attention, it only asks for your thumb. Swipe, scroll, repeat. At first glance, it seems harmless, a little distraction before sleep. But beneath the surface, your brain is being conditioned. With each scroll, It rewards you with tiny bursts of dopamine. A video makes you laugh. A quote makes you think. A post makes you angry. The emotional cocktail is addictive, and your brain, wired for novelty, starts craving the next thing. Not because it needs it, but because it doesn't know when to stop. The infinite scroll effect turns your attention into currency. Each swipe is a silent transaction. You trade minutes of your life for moments of fleeting stimulation. The more you scroll, the harder it becomes to focus, to rest, to be still. Worse yet, this effect stretches beyond screens. It seeps into conversations, relationships, and thoughts. We begin treating life like a feed endlessly moving, never settling. We jump from topic to topic, moment to moment, looking for something that feels satisfying, but rarely finding it. And at night, when you finally close your eyes, your mind doesn't rest. It replays the scroll. Images flash. Thoughts race. You wonder why you're restless. But your brain was trained to never pause. Escaping this trap starts with awareness. Notice when you're scrolling not to learn or connect, but just to escape stillness. Stillness feels uncomfortable because it lacks the distraction we've grown used to. But it's in that stillness that clarity returns. Try replacing 5 minutes of scrolling with 5 minutes of silence. Let your thoughts stretch. Let your mind breathe. The world will still be there when you return. The infinite scroll effect isn't about your phone. It's about your attention. It deserves to be reclaimed. The Stillness Illusion. Imagine sitting on a quiet bench by a serene lake. The surface of the water is undisturbed, and everything around you feels still motionless, calm, at peace. But below that surface, unseen currents twist and flow. Fish dart through weeds, and tiny particles shift endlessly. What seems like stillness is just a trick of your senses. In our minds, we often fall into this same illusion. We think we are standing still when really, change is happening within us, all around us, and even because of us. This is the Stillness Illusion, the psychological trap of believing that nothing is changing, even when change is constant. The Stillness Illusion works quietly, like a soft whisper in the back of your thoughts. You might feel like life is paused, like you're stuck, or that your emotions and habits are frozen in place. You might tell yourself, nothing is happening, or I'm not moving forward. But reality doesn't need your permission to move. Time continues. The world keeps turning. And even in your stillness, you are becoming someone else thought by thought, moment by moment. This trap often shows up when we're in moments of calm, routine, or numbness. Perhaps you're in a job that feels repetitive, or maybe your days blur together with no sharp highs or deep lows. It feels like you've stopped growing, but growth can be invisible. Healing doesn't always announce itself. And sometimes the most profound transformation happens beneath the surface, like the tectonic shifts beneath the Earth's crust. Think of a seed planted deep in the soil. For weeks, there's no sign of life. The surface looks the same. But underground, roots are reaching, cells are dividing, and something incredible is unfolding. The seed is not still, it's just unseen. And so are you. The danger of the Stillness Illusion is that it can create despair. When you believe nothing is changing, you lose motivation. You stop pushing yourself. You might even fall into habits of inaction, passivity, or disconnection. But the truth is, there's always movement. Your thoughts are shaping your future. Your choices, no matter how small, ripple out into the days ahead. To escape this illusion, we must learn to observe ourselves gently and honestly. Reflect on your week. What did you think about? What did you learn? What small effort did you make that wasn't there before? It doesn't have to be dramatic. Not every change makes a sound, but even silence moves. When you understand that stillness is not the absence of progress, but often its birthplace, you begin to see your life differently. You no longer rush change because you trust it's happening. You don't panic in quiet moments. because you know growth can be slow, subtle, and sacred. So next time you sit in silence and feel like nothing is happening, remember the lake. On the surface, it's still, but beneath, life flows endlessly. Personal relevance trap. Picture yourself in a crowd, watching a speaker on stage. They tell a story about a stranger, a far-off land, or a different culture, and yet something in you lights up. The words feel like they were meant just for you. You nod, you reflect, you relate. That's the magic of connection, but sometimes that magic plays tricks on us. The personal relevance trap is the illusion that everything we hear, read, or see is directly connected to Yuzavan when it's not. It's our mind's way of weaving the outside world into the fabric of our identity. We look for ourselves in others' words. We turn general statements into personal truths. And often, we misinterpret what wasn't about us at all. It's not always harmful. In fact, this bias helps us learn. When we relate ideas to our own experience, we remember them better. We understand concepts more deeply, but the trap lies in overreaching. When we assume every message is about us, we distort reality. A vague social media post becomes an attack. A neutral glance turns into a judgment. A passing comment transforms into a critique of who we are. This trap can stir emotions, defensiveness, insecurity, even guilt. Someone says, "People should work harder," and we wonder if they're pointing at us. A friend mentions, "Some people are always late," and we instantly feel exposed. In truth, those words may not have been meant for us at all. But the personal relevance trap whispers, "They're talking about you." It begins early in life. As children, we are the center of our own worlds. It's only natural to think everything revolves around us, but as we grow, that perspective can linger. It becomes a habit, a lens through which we see the world. And when we carry that habit into adulthood, it can lead to unnecessary pain. The key to freeing ourselves is to pause before reacting. Ask, "Is this really about me?" Sometimes it isn't. If so, reflection can help, but many times it isn't. And recognizing that brings freedom. You don't have to carry burdens that don't belong to you. It also helps to embrace curiosity over assumption. If someone says something unclear, ask what they meant. Let people explain themselves before jumping to conclusions. Not everything is a mirror. Some things are just windows views into someone else's world. And most importantly, remember this. You are not required to make everything personal. Some things simply are. They exist outside your story. And that's okay. Stepping out of the personal relevance trap doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you choose peace over paranoia. It means you leave space for interpretation, for context, for grace. So next time your mind says, "This must be about me," take a breath, step back, and see the world not as a reflection, but as a vast, complex place where not everything is yours to hold. Simplicity, craving bias. Imagine walking through a dense forest just after dawn. The morning fog hangs low, wrapping the trees in mystery. You're holding a map, but it's full of strange markings and unfamiliar paths. You squint at the symbols, but they don't make sense. Then, you see a sign nailed to a tree, "This way." Just 2 words, but it cuts through the confusion like sunlight through the mist. It feels right, simple, direct, certain. So you follow it. And in that moment, you've stepped into the grip of a powerful trap, the simplicity craving bias. We, as humans, are not built to navigate chaos with comfort. Our minds yearn for clarity, our hearts chase neatness, and our thoughts avoid clutter like water avoids fire. Simplicity feels safe. It gives the illusion of control in a world that rarely offers any. That's the essence of this psychological trap. When complexity overwhelms us, our minds crave the comfort of a simple explanation, even if that explanation is incomplete, inaccurate, or entirely false. This bias can influence everything from our beliefs about the universe to the way we judge other people. Instead of embracing nuance, we reduce ideas to black or white. Instead of asking why someone behaves a certain way, we label them lazy, rude, evil. These shortcuts simplify our mental workload, but they also blind us. They cut out the texture of truth. In politics, for example, simplicity is a powerful weapon. Candidates often win not by explaining policies in depth, but by offering a single slogan. Make it better. For the people. Change now. These messages are easy to understand and emotionally charged, but real solutions are never so simple. In personal life, the simplicity craving bias sneaks into our daily routines. We choose the easiest answer when we're tired or overwhelmed. We stick to what we know, even if it's wrong. It's why conspiracy theories often spread faster than facts, because they offer easy stories with clear villains and heroes. Now imagine you're trying to understand why someone you love keeps hurting you emotionally. The complex truth might involve past trauma, communication issues, or conflicting emotional needs. But your mind wants peace, not puzzles. So it decides, they just don't care. That's a simpler story, but is it the right one? This bias also shapes our views on ourselves. When we fail at something, instead of unpacking the reasons, maybe it was bad timing, poor preparation, or outside factors, we say, I'm just not good enough. One sentence, many cracks beneath it. To break free from the simplicity craving bias, we must learn to sit with uncertainty. We must train our minds to ask better questions, to see the gray, to notice the threads hiding behind bold colors. It doesn't mean abandoning clarity, it means earning it. In meditation, practitioners are taught to observe thoughts without judgment. It's a way of saying, complexity exists, and it's okay. Not every question needs an immediate answer. Not every situation fits into a box. Next time you're presented with a simple solution that feels too good to be true, pause. Ask yourself, what's missing from this story? What am I ignoring? Complexity isn't your enemy. It's the soil from which understanding grows. And sometimes, the deeper the roots, the stronger the tree. Depth illusion. Imagine you're swimming in a perfectly clear lake. The water is still, like glass, and beneath the surface, you see the lake bed. It looks just a few feet below. You reach your hand down, but it keeps going. And going. What seems shallow is, in truth, a deep and hidden world. You've just experienced a physical version of what psychologists call the depth illusion. In the realm of thought, the depth illusion works in reverse. Some things seem profound, layered, and meaningful when in fact they are not. They appear deep, but on closer inspection, they're surprisingly hollow. This illusion is not about truth or falsehood. It's about the feeling of depth, the appearance of insight. Have you ever heard a quote that sounded incredibly wise, at first like, "The absence of presence is still a presence," only to realize it doesn't actually say anything concrete? That's the depth illusion. Our minds are wired to seek meaning, and when words or ideas are vague, poetic, or emotionally charged, we often assign depth to them, even if none exists. This trap isn't limited to philosophy or self-help slogans. It affects how we consume media, how we choose leaders, even how we evaluate people in our lives. Someone who speaks with a calm, confident tone may seem more intelligent than someone who fumbles, even if the latter has more accurate knowledge. A documentary with dramatic music and slow-motion shots might feel profound, regardless of its content. Social media is filled with statements that trigger this illusion. The more abstract, the more likely we are to think, wow, that's deep. But abstraction alone isn't wisdom. True depth requires context, clarity, and consistency. This illusion also touches how we view ourselves. When we reflect on our lives, we sometimes create false depth to feel better about our pain or our mistakes. We say, everything happens for a reason, not because it's always true, but because it makes the chaos feel meaningful. It gives suffering a purpose. It softens the randomness of existence. Now, there's nothing wrong with finding comfort in such thoughts, but it becomes a trap when we stop questioning, stop exploring. When we accept every idea that feels deep as truth, we risk missing out on the real, raw complexity of life. Think about a dream you've had that seemed full of symbols and importance, only to fade into nonsense once you tried to explain it. The mind often weaves illusions that are more about sensation than substance. To escape the depth illusion, we must learn to examine what lies beneath the surface of our impressions. Ask, why does this feel wise? Is it because it clarifies something or because it sounds mysterious? Is the speaker offering insight or just appealing to my emotions? The goal is not to doubt everything, but to pause long enough to understand what we're really absorbing. Depth is not about how complex something sounds, it's about how much it helps us see the world more clearly. So, the next time something strikes you as profound, don't stop at the surface. Dive in, ask, reflect, question. The true depths are never loud. They're quiet, steady, and waiting for those who dare to look beyond the illusion. Mental shadow casting. Imagine you're walking through a quiet, dimly lit corridor of an old memory. The walls seem familiar, lined with faded portraits of past decisions and distant echoes of old voices. You turn a corner, and suddenly, a chill runs through you, not because of what's there, but because of what you think might be. Welcome to the landscape of mental shadow casting. This trap is subtle. It's not about what is seen, but what is projected. When the mind encounters uncertainty, it doesn't always pause. It fills in the blanks with the echoes of past fears, assumptions, and unresolved conflicts. These mental shadows become shapes on the wall, threats that may not exist but feel just as real. In relationships, a friend's silence becomes a sign of betrayal. In ambition, a small failure grows into proof of inadequacy. Our brains, brilliant at storytelling, build entire narratives based on shadows, not light. Mental shadow casting is deeply tied to emotional residue. Imagine the aftermath of a storm, not just the physical debris, but the lingering scent of rain, the dampness in the air. Past experiences do the same in our mind. Even after time has passed, the emotional weather remains. And when we face a similar situation, the shadows rise again. It becomes difficult to distinguish between intuition and projection. Are we being cautious, or are we simply afraid? Are we seeing clearly, or are we letting old wounds tint the present? The trap lies in reacting not to the moment, but to the ghosts of moments before. To navigate this, one must learn the gentle art of questioning the narrative. Instead of assuming intentions, we ask. Instead of bracing for pain, we stay present. Meditation helps here not to silence the shadows, but to see them for what they are, remnants, not reality. With awareness, we can say, "This fear is old. It belongs to another time." The light that dispels mental shadow casting isn't denial, but clarity, and in that clarity, we find peace. The context trap. Imagine picking up a single puzzle piece from a vast, intricate picture. Alone, it's just a vague shape with no meaning. But placed within the full image, everything becomes clear. Now imagine mistaking that one piece as the whole puzzle. That is the essence of the context trap. Our minds crave simplicity. They want to make quick judgments. And to do that, they often ignore the full picture. We see a frown and assume anger, without knowing the person just got bad news. We hear a pause in a sentence and label it hesitation, unaware it's a moment of thought. Out of context, everything changes. This trap plays out across every part of life. In media, a quote removed from its source becomes a weapon. In relationships, a single act overshadows years of care. In work, one mistake defines an entire career. It's the danger of the partial truth, seductive, misleading fragment. Context isn't just background, it's the lens through which meaning is shaped. Take a single word, fine. In text, it's neutral. In tone, it could mean anger, sadness, or indifference. Without the full landscape, we risk misinterpretation. And once the mind settles on an interpretation, it resists correction. It clings to the story it's built, even if the foundation is missing. The context trap feeds on speed. The faster we judge, the less we understand. Slowing down helps. Asking, listening, pausing, all tools to expand the frame before drawing conclusions. Awareness is the first step. Realizing that every moment has layers, every word has echoes, and every person has a story we don't see. When we remember that, we soften, we judge less. And in that softness, deeper truths emerge. Self-doubt spiral. Imagine standing at the edge of a stage, ready to speak. The lights are bright, the room silent. Just before you take a step, a voice inside whispers, "Are you sure you're good enough?" It's quiet at first, but then it echoes, growing louder, curling around every thought. Welcome to the self-doubt spiral. This trap doesn't start with failure, it begins with fear. A tiny crack in confidence widens quickly. One missed opportunity becomes a reflection of all your flaws. One critique becomes confirmation that you're not enough. The mind, once curious, becomes a courtroom. Every memory is evidence. Every silence is a verdict. Self-doubt is not humility. Humility is knowing your limits. Self-doubt is believing you have none. It doesn't keep you grounded. It keeps you stuck. You replay conversations, wondering if you said the wrong thing. You over-prepare, yet still feel unready. You achieve, but the satisfaction fades too fast, replaced by a hunger for external validation. The spiral deepens when comparison joins in. You look at others, not just their strengths, but their confidence, and you wonder, why can't I feel that? Social media amplifies it. Filters on faces and lives create an illusion of ease, of certainty, and the spiral continues. To break free, you don't silence the voice you speak back. Gently, firmly. You remind yourself of the journey, the progress, the moments of courage. You practice self-compassion, not as a reward for success, but as a right. Small actions help, saying, "I don't know," without shame, trying despite the fear, noticing when you're spiraling and choosing just once to step outside it. Everyone doubts, even the confident, especially the wise. But they move forward anyway, not because they're certain, but because they've learned that courage isn't the absence of doubt. It's the decision that doubt doesn't get the final word. And in that decision, the spiral slows, then stills, then breaks. Preference anchoring. Imagine standing in a quiet antique shop tucked away in an old alley. The walls are lined with aged clocks, each ticking at its own rhythm. You reach for one, a small brass timepiece, and admire its craftsmanship. The shopkeeper, with a gentle smile, tells you it's one of the oldest, priced at a premium. Then he shows you another simpler, newer, and far less expensive. Suddenly, the second clock feels like a great deal. This is preference anchoring at play. In psychology, preference anchoring refers to the way our initial exposure to a piece of information acts as a reference point, or anchor, for all future decisions. When we are presented with an option first, whether it's a price, an opinion, or a choice, our brain subtly locks onto it. Even if that anchor is arbitrary, our mind continues to compare subsequent choices against it. And the trap? We often don't even realize we're doing it. Picture a person shopping for headphones. The first pair they see costs $300. Everything after that, even a $150 pair, feels cheaper and more reasonable. Not because it truly is, but because their mind has anchored on the initial high price. In the same way, if someone you trust tells you a restaurant is amazing, you walk in with expectations that shape your entire experience. Flavors taste better, service feels warmer, all because of that original anchor. In relationships, anchoring can shape how we view people. If your first impression of someone is negative, Every future action they take may be seen through that biased lens. On the flip side, if someone initially charms you, their later flaws might seem smaller, filtered through your anchored admiration. This trap becomes especially powerful in fast-paced environments where decisions are made quickly. Marketers and negotiators understand this well. They throw out a high price, knowing you'll mentally cling to it even as you haggle. Your mind, unknowingly tethered, makes what follows feel more acceptable. Breaking free from the preference anchoring trap requires awareness. Pause when making choices. Ask yourself, am I truly evaluating this on its own merit, or am I comparing it to an initial anchor? Try changing your perspective. Imagine reversing the order of options. Would your choice still feel right? As you reflect on your day, consider how many of your preferences were truly your own, and how many were shaped by the first thing you saw, heard, or felt. Anchors are subtle but strong, and recognizing them is the first step in regaining clarity. Reassurance Dependence. Imagine walking a tightrope across a deep ravine. With each careful step, you glance back at the guide behind you, waiting for a nod or a word of encouragement. Without it, the rope feels thinner, the wind harsher, your balance unsure. This is the world of reassurance dependence, where we rely heavily on external validation to feel secure in our decisions. Reassurance dependence is a psychological trap where one's sense of confidence, clarity, or peace becomes tied to repeated affirmations from others. It begins subtly: a quick message to a friend asking, "Was I overreacting?" A pause before sending an email, waiting for someone to say, "Yes, that sounds fine." And before long, a habit forms. We begin outsourcing our self-trust. This reliance can stem from fear of being wrong, fear of judgment, fear of failure. Reassurance becomes a cushion, softening the impact of uncertainty. But the more we seek it, the more it slips into a loop. Like a plant that needs constant watering, our confidence wilts without fresh validation. In friendships, this trap can lead to tension. Constantly needing affirmation can exhaust those around us. In work, it can stall progress, decisions delayed, creativity dampened. And personally, it disconnects us from our own inner compass. We stop asking, "What do I believe?" and instead ask, "What do they think?" Imagine a child learning to ride a bike. At first, they need the steady hand of a parent, but over time, they must let go of that guiding touch. Reassurance is like those training wheels, necessary for a time, but eventually, we must pedal alone. To navigate out of this trap, begin with small acts of self-trust. Make a decision without telling anyone. Sit with uncertainty. Let the silence be a space of strength, not fear. Build confidence like a muscle, not through perfection, but through repeated practice. At the end of the day, ask yourself, did I seek reassurance because I needed help, or because I feared being wrong? The difference is subtle, but powerful. True confidence is not the absence of doubt. It is the quiet ability to move forward despite it. Expected outcome trap. Imagine setting out on a journey with a map in your hand, believing you know exactly where the road leads. Every turn you take, you expect familiar sights. But instead, the landscape shifts: a valley where you expected mountains, silence where you expected noise. The more it diverges, the more frustrated you feel. This is the expected outcome trap, when our mind clings to a specific result, making it hard to accept anything else. The expected outcome trap happens when we attach ourselves too tightly to how we think things should unfold. It's rooted in control, the belief that if we do things a certain way, a certain outcome must follow. We study hard, so we expect top marks. We're kind, so we expect kindness in return. We plan, we prepare, we hope, and when reality doesn't match the script we wrote, disappointment strikes. This trap quietly shapes relationships, careers, and personal growth. Consider someone who helps a friend, expecting appreciation. When it doesn't come, they feel unvalued, not because their action changed, but because their expected outcome did not arrive. or a person who follows all the right steps in life, only to find their dreams delayed or denied. The mind dislikes unpredictability. It seeks patterns, certainty, resolution. Expected outcomes offer a sense of safety, but when outcomes diverge, as they often do, the trap tightens. We replay events, asking, "What went wrong?" even when nothing did. We resist the present, clinging to an imagined future. To step outside this trap, shift from outcome to intention. Focus on what you can control: your actions, your mindset, your effort. Let the results unfold without demand. Practice curiosity over expectation. "I wonder how this will turn out," is lighter than "this must happen." Imagine waking each day not with a script, but with a blank page. Rather than expecting the world to follow your lines, let it surprise you. See detours not as failures, but as hidden paths. When the day ends, ask yourself not whether things went as planned, but whether you stayed present, true, and open. In that, there is peace. Because when we release the grip on how life should look, we finally see it for what it truly is. Mental autopilot bias. Imagine waking up one morning, brushing your teeth, sipping your usual cup of tea, and leaving home for work. You pass the same traffic signal, wave at the same neighbor, and reach your office without even remembering the journey. It all felt automatic, as though you didn't drive the car, but the car drove itself, as though life took over the steering wheel and you simply rode along. This is the quiet grip of the mental autopilot bias, a psychological trap, where repetition becomes a lullaby, and awareness quietly steps out of the room. Mental autopilot bias is the mind's tendency to operate on a default mode when performing routine or familiar tasks. While this may seem harmless and efficient, this mental shortcut can numb our senses, cloud our perception, and slowly detach us from the richness of lived experience. And what's most eerie? You might never notice it's happening until you've missed years in the haze of habit. Let's take a walk through a quiet neighborhood. Picture a man named Ravi who walks the same park trail every evening. The same turns, the same tree stump he skips over, the same glance at his wristwatch before heading back home. At some point, Ravi stops seeing the color of the flowers lining the path. He forgets the sound of the birds chirping. His walk becomes mechanical, not an experience, but a programmed event. He no longer walks the trail walks him. This autopilot mode exists for a reason. It evolved as a survival mechanism, helping us conserve mental energy by automating predictable behaviors. Think of how we tie shoelaces or unlock our phones. But what happens when this automatic behavior spreads beyond menial tasks and seeps into our conversations, relationships, and even dreams? We start drifting. A kind of cognitive sleepwalking begins to shape our days. Mental autopilot bias doesn't shout. It whispers. It tells you everything is normal, everything is fine. It gently rocks you into believing that just because nothing is wrong, everything is right. And so, the present moment begins to dissolve. It begins with the familiar. Routine can be comforting. It creates stability, a rhythm. But when that rhythm becomes too strong, it drowns out the melody of life. The flavors of food fade. Conversations become background noise. You laugh at jokes you didn't hear. You agree to plans you didn't process. Your body is present, but your mind, somewhere else. Now, imagine being at a dinner table, the clink of forks, the hum of conversation, and yet your eyes are fixed on your plate, your mind already thinking about tomorrow's to-do list. You've fallen into a time slip. Your attention has moved ahead, leaving the now behind. The meal finishes. You feel unsatisfied, not because the food was bad, but because you weren't there to taste it. This disconnection doesn't just affect individuals. Entire communities, organizations, and cultures can fall prey to autopilot. Decisions made without reflection, traditions followed without question, lives lived without introspection. It's not a lack of intelligence, but a scarcity of awareness. We begin to confuse movement with meaning. Just because we're doing something doesn't mean we're truly experiencing it. Just because we're productive doesn't mean we're present. But here's the gentle truth. Waking up from mental autopilot bias doesn't require a grand revolution. It starts with tiny awakenings, pauses, moments of intentional attention, like feeling the warmth of a morning sunbeam on your face, like truly listening to someone without forming a reply, like noticing the texture of the floor beneath your feet. The antidote to mental autopilot is mindfulness, not in a buzzword kind of way, but as a return to reality, a soft nudge to remind yourself, I am here. Try this simple exercise. Pick one routine action today, maybe brushing your teeth or drinking water, and do it slowly. Observe the motion, the sensation, the taste, the sound. Let it pull you back into the moment. Let it remind you what it means to be awake. And when the day ends, ask yourself, did I truly live this day, or did I let it pass me by? It's easy to sleepwalk through life, but every so often, life sends you an alarm clock, a sudden realization, a fleeting moment of clarity, a child's laughter. These are your invitations to step out of autopilot. When we reclaim awareness, even the smallest things become extraordinary. The way wind brushes past your skin, the way your heartbeat slows when you breathe deeply, the way someone smiles when they feel seen. Mental autopilot bias doesn't make you bad. It makes you human. But knowing it exists, that's the start of being fully alive. So the next time you take that same road home, take a different turn. Notice the sky. Smell the air. Smile at a stranger. Invite the world in. Because life isn't meant to be lived on default. It's meant to be felt, moment by moment, wide awake. Perception lag. Imagine you're standing at the edge of a still lake just before dawn. The air is cool, heavy with the scent of dew-kissed earth, and the world feels suspended in a hush so profound it's as if time itself has paused to catch its breath. The sky, a soft gradient of indigo bleeding into gold, mirrors the water's glassy surface, an untouched canvas stretching endlessly before you. A single pebble slips from your hand, tumbling through the silence, and plunges into the lake with a faint, almost apologetic plop. For a fleeting moment, nothing happens. The water holds its breath, undisturbed, as if deciding whether to acknowledge the intrusion. Then, slowly, almost reluctantly, the ripples begin delicate, expanding circles that glide outward, each one a quiet echo of the stone's descent. They travel far beyond where the pebble first broke the surface, reaching toward the shore, toward your feet. If you only glanced down when those ripples lapped against your toes, you might assume the pebble had just fallen. You'd feel the effect and mistake it for the cause, believing the moment was fresh when, in truth, it had already slipped into the past long before you noticed. This is the essence of perception lag, a subtle, often invisible delay between what happens and when we truly register it, a silent gap that separates the spark of an event from the light of comprehension. Our minds are not precision instruments, not cameras snapping reality into instant, unfiltered frames. They don't simply record and replay the world as it unfolds before us with mechanical fidelity. Instead, they are artists, weaving tapestries of experience through a complex process of filtering, interpreting, and reconstructing. Every sight, sound, and sensation passes through a prism of memory, emotion, and expectation lenses that bend and color the raw data of life before it settles into something we can grasp. When something new pierces our awareness, a friend's offhand remark that lands oddly, a shift in the cadence of someone's voice, a sudden twist in our own emotional weather, we don't always clock it right away. The moment arrives, but its meaning lingers just out of reach, like a word teetering on the tip of your tongue. Sometimes it takes minutes to catch the thread. Other times, hours stretch into days, or even years unfurl before the pieces click into place, and we understand what really happened beneath the surface. Think back to a conversation from years ago, one that felt ordinary in the moment, its edges softened by the hum of routine. Maybe something seemed slightly off, a pause that hung too long, a smile that didn't quite reach the eyes but you let it slide, chalking it up to a fleeting quirk or your own imagination. Then, one quiet afternoon, years later, a thought drifts up unbidden, as gentle and persistent as a leaf floating down a stream. Maybe they were trying to tell me something. Maybe that silence wasn't just a stumble in the rhythm of speech, it was a confession, a plea, a fear unspoken, or perhaps a love too fragile to voice. Maybe it was a goodbye disguised as a pause, and in that instant of hindsight, the memory sharpens into focus, its contours vivid and undeniable. What once slipped past unnoticed now stands in bold relief, a revelation that rewrites the script of a moment you thought you'd understood. That's perception lag at work, not mere forgetfulness or a lapse in attention, but the mind's intricate dance of protection, conservation, and delay, shielding us from the full weight of life until we're ready to bear it. Consider a different scene. You step into a room alive with laughter, the kind that bounces off the walls and wraps around you like a warm blanket. Faces glow with mirth, and you join in, your own smile mirroring theirs, carried along by the infectious energy. Yet beneath the surface, something feels faintly off, a thread of distance you can't quite pin down. You brush it aside, caught up in the moment, and the evening rolls on. Hours later, though, as you lie in the stillness of your bed, the memory shifts. A glance that lingered a beat too long flickers into view. A joke, tossed casually your way, reveals a hidden edge when replayed in your mind's quiet theater, and then it hits you. You didn't feel included. In that bright, laughing room, you were somehow a part, an observer more than a participant. But your brain, ever the gentle guardian, didn't let that truth crash over you in the moment. It softened the blow, letting the realization seep in later, muted and manageable, like a tide creeping up the shore, rather than a wave breaking hard against it. This lag weaves its way through relationships with a subtlety that can be both tender and treacherous. A friend begins to drift, their replies growing shorter, their presence thinning, and you tell yourself it's just the chaos of life. They're busy, distracted, nothing more. A partner's warmth cools ever so slightly, their touch less frequent, their gaze less steady, and you pin it on stress or fatigue, unwilling to look closer. The signs are there, scattered like breadcrumbs along a winding path, but your eyes are trained elsewhere, on hope, on habit, on the comfort of the familiar. Only later, sometimes far too late, does the pattern emerge. The drift wasn't random. The coldness wasn't fleeting. When clarity finally arrives, it doesn't thunder in with drama or fanfare. It whispers, a slow unfolding of understanding that reshapes the past into something you can no longer ignore. In the workplace, perception lag colors how we navigate feedback, conflict, or change. Picture a colleague offering a suggestion during a meeting, their tone measured, but their words carrying a faint sting. You bristle, quick to defend your approach, certain they've misjudged your intent or overlooked your effort. The moment passes, the conversation shifts, and you move on, or so you think. But later, as the day winds down and the office hum fades, their words echo back. You turn them over, examine them from a new angle, and a quiet possibility emerges. Maybe they were right. Maybe they saw a blind spot you'd shielded from view, a truth you weren't ready to face amid the heat of the exchange. It's a humbling shift, this delayed recognition that your defenses had blurred the message until time and distance allowed it to settle into focus. Even within ourselves, perception lag is a constant companion, threading through the ebb and flow of our inner world. You might wake one morning feeling restless, a vague unease tugging at your edges, but the source eludes you. You carry on, dismissing it as a passing mood. Days later, though, the dots connect. An unresolved conversation you'd buried, a fleeting moment of vulnerability you'd brushed aside, a quiet ache you'd refused to name. Our emotions often outpace our awareness, arriving like scouts ahead of the main party, signaling truths we're not yet equipped to meet. When the mind finally catches up, it doesn't just reveal the present. It reinterprets the past, casting new light on shadows we'd walked through blindly. There's a quiet beauty in this delay, a grace woven into its fabric. If we felt every ripple of life the instant it touched us, if every joy, every wound, every revelation landed with full force in real time, the weight might crush us. Perception lag is the mind's pause button, a buffer that softens the edges, granting us space to breathe, to reflect, to grow into the understanding we need. It's a kindness, a slow-release mechanism that tempers overwhelm with gentleness. Yet it also calls us to listen more closely to ourselves, to the world, to the faint signals that whisper beneath the noise. That tightening in your chest when a friend's tone shifts, that word that sticks in your mind long after it's spoken, that ripple you feel but can't yet name, those are invitations. They ask us to pause, to sit with the discomfort or the curiosity, to trust that the answer will surface when the time is right. Think of the last time you laughed with a crowd and later wondered if the joy was truly yours, or the time you said, "I'm fine," with conviction, only to unravel in the stillness that followed, realizing the lie you'd told yourself. These aren't contradictions or failures of self-awareness. They're layers, the mind peeling back its own truths at a pace it deems safe, guiding you toward clarity with a patience you might not extend to yourself. Understanding perception lag invites a deeper patience for ourselves, for others, for the messy, non-linear way we process life. Not every reaction will be instant. Not every truth will blaze into view the moment it's born. But if we carve out space, quiet, unjudged, unhurried, clarity often finds its way through the cracks. Picture that lake again, the dawn light now spilling over the horizon, painting the water in hues of amber and rose. Another pebble drops, breaking the stillness. The surface holds for a heartbeat, then yields to the ripples, each one spreading wider, slower, more deliberate. You stand there, not just waiting for the sound, but for the understanding that follows. And when it comes, it's like remembering something you never knew you'd forgotten. A gift, a slow and graceful unfolding of truth in a world that spins too fast. So the next time something feels off, when your heart clenches without a clear why, when a glance or a silence lingers beyond its welcome, don't rush past it. Pause, sit with the ripple, let it spread, let it breathe. The answer will rise, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but in its own time. Because beneath the surface, your mind holds what your eyes missed. And eventually, with a quiet inevitability, perception catches up to reality. The Obviousness Illusion. Imagine you're sitting in a dimly lit room, surrounded by others who seem to understand something that you don't. A lecturer speaks at the front of the room, drawing diagrams, quoting studies, and gesturing with enthusiasm. People around you nod, as if everything being said is clear as day. You, on the other hand, feel like you're grasping at smoke. It's as though the clarity others seem to experience is being kept from you, hidden behind a veil you can't lift. You begin to question yourself. Is everyone truly understanding this so easily? Or are they just pretending? Welcome to the Obviousness Illusion. This psychological trap takes hold when something appears so evident or universally understood that we assume everyone else must grasp it just as easily. It tricks our minds into believing that what is clear to us should be equally clear to others. Or worse, it convinces us that we should understand something simply because others seem to. But often, the truth is far more complicated. The Obviousness Illusion shows itself in many corners of our lives. Consider a moment in school when a teacher explained a math problem, and a handful of students quickly nodded in agreement. The rest of the class, unsure and silent, assumed they were the odd ones out, not because they were less capable, but because the clarity in others seemed so effortless. That apparent obviousness became a mirror, reflecting back doubt instead of understanding. But here's the twist. What is obvious to one may not be to another. And what seems clear today might have been confusing just yesterday. The illusion lies in the assumption, in the leap our minds make from personal clarity to universal comprehension. Let's step into another scene. Picture a team of scientists discussing climate change data. One researcher presents a set of graphs and statistics with confidence. To her, the pattern is glaringly clear: a sharp rise in temperatures over time. She assumes her audience will see the same trend and reach the same conclusions. But among the listeners are individuals with different experiences, varying levels of scientific literacy, and unique belief systems. The researcher is caught in the obviousness illusion. She forgets that her years of training make her perception different. What feels like an obvious truth to her might appear murky, even questionable, to someone else. The danger here is subtle but powerful. When we believe something is obvious, we may stop explaining it. We might fail to offer context or detail, assuming it's not needed. In doing so, we leave others behind. We close the door to dialogue and shared understanding. And on the flip side, when we are the ones feeling lost, we hesitate to ask questions out of fear of looking foolish. After all, it's supposed to be obvious, right? The illusion also plays out in relationships. A partner might expect the other to just know how they feel or what they need. It should be obvious, they think. But feelings are not facts, and expectations are not always shared. The result? Misunderstandings, frustrations, and unspoken needs that slowly grow into walls. In the digital age, the obviousness illusion has found fertile ground. Social media posts, news headlines, and online debates often reduce complex topics into bite-sized opinions. And once we've formed an opinion, it can feel so clear, so logical, that we struggle to understand how others could think differently. We assume our viewpoint is the baseline. The result is a growing divide, not because of malice, but because of misplaced assumptions about what is clear and what is not. Now, imagine a group of explorers venturing into a dense, foggy forest. One of them carries a map. He's been here before, knows the turns, recognizes the terrain. To him, the path is straightforward. He starts walking quickly, confidently, assuming the others will keep up. But the rest of the group is stumbling, disoriented, unsure of which way to go. The leader turns around, frustrated. "Isn't it obvious?" he says. But to the group, nothing is. The fog hasn't lifted for them. This is what the obviousness illusion feels like in motion. A person ahead in knowledge, experience, or perspective often forgets the path they once walked to get there. They no longer see the fog that others still navigate. So how do we dissolve this illusion? The first step is humility. Recognizing that what feels obvious to us might not be to others is a gateway to empathy. It opens space for patience and explanation. It allows us to guide rather than assume. The second step is curiosity. Instead of staying silent when something seems unclear, we can give ourselves permission to ask, to say, "I don't understand," without shame. Because clarity is not a measure of intelligence, but a journey of learning. And lastly, it's about awareness. When we catch ourselves thinking, "How could they not get this?" or "This is common sense," we pause, we breathe. We remember that common sense is not universal, that knowledge is not born, but built. The obviousness illusion teaches us that understanding is not a straight line, but a web. Each mind is its own universe, shaped by stories, memories, cultures, and experiences. What is a bright star in one mind may be a hidden shadow in another. So the next time you find yourself in a conversation, a classroom, a conflict, or even a quiet moment with yourself, remember this: clarity is kind, and kindness creates connection. In this way, we move through the fog not as solitary travelers, but as companions, helping each other see what might have been hidden, illuminating the path not because it is obvious, but because we choose to walk it together. Cognitive mirror trap. Imagine waking up one morning and standing in front of your mirror, only to realize the reflection staring back isn't quite right. It mimics your gestures, wears your clothes, and even tilts its head the way you do. But something feels off. It's not just the lighting or the glass. It's deeper than that. You lean in and so does the reflection. You smile and so does it. But the expression you see doesn't carry the same weight. It looks like you, but it doesn't feel like you. That eerie moment, that unsettling awareness, marks the beginning of what we call the cognitive mirror trap. This psychological phenomenon occurs when our self-perception becomes entangled in how we imagine others perceive us. It's the invisible mirror we carry in our minds, constantly adjusting our behavior, our beliefs, and even our identity based on these imagined reflections. You walk into a room and without realizing it, you start mirroring the body language, tone, or attitudes of those around you. But more importantly, you begin to adjust who you are because of how you think they see you. Let's go back to the mirror. In life, we don't only look into actual mirrors but into metaphorical ones. The glances of strangers, the words of friends, the silence of a room, or even the number of likes on a photo. Each interaction becomes a mirror, and slowly, bit by bit, your sense of self gets handed over to these reflections. You begin to ask, how am I coming across? Do they like me? Am I enough? This mental trap grows deeper when you unconsciously believe that people's reactions always reflect something true about you. A frown from a stranger becomes a sign that you did something wrong. A compliment makes you feel validated. A lack of attention makes you question your worth. But what if none of those reactions actually have anything to do with you? This is where the trap tightens. Because we are social beings, we rely heavily on external feedback to shape our identity. But over time, that feedback becomes distorted. Our minds start projecting assumptions, judgments, and fears into the mirror. What we see isn't real. It's what we think others see. And here's the twist. Those imagined perceptions become part of our internal dialogue. They shape our decisions, alter our goals, and affect our emotional state. You may have wanted to express yourself freely, but the imagined judgment of others pulls you back. You may have believed something strongly, but the fear of ridicule makes you change your stance. You find yourself living not as who you are, but as who you think others want you to be. The cognitive mirror trap thrives in silence. It whispers when you're alone, convincing you to rehearse conversations in your mind, to rethink a comment you made, or to regret a choice you took. It makes you curate your words, posture, and even dreams. It nudges you toward conformity not because others demand it, but because your reflection expects it. Have you ever laughed at a joke you didn't find funny just because everyone else did? Or hesitated to share your honest opinion in a group discussion? These moments may seem small, but they are echoes of the trap. The reflection you hold in your mind dictates your behavior more than your authentic self does. The internet amplifies this trap. Every post, every comment, every photo becomes a bid for reflection. We scroll, we post, we wait, not for meaning, but for validation. And the metrics of likes and shares become distorted mirrors reflecting back not who we are, but how well we play the game. So how do we escape the cognitive mirror trap? First, we must become aware. Notice the moments when your thoughts are less about your own feelings and more about how you might appear. Ask yourself, am I doing this because it aligns with who I am, or because I want someone to see me a certain way? Second, separate perception from reality. Understand that the way people respond to you often reflects their own internal state. A cold reply might stem from their bad day, not your bad words. The mirror doesn't always reflect truth. Sometimes it reflects projection. Third, return to authenticity. Reconnect with your values, your voice, and your inner compass. Create space for silence, not the silence filled with imagined dialogue, but a silence that listens to your true self. The less you depend on external mirrors, the clearer your internal image becomes. Think of a musician playing their favorite song in an empty room. No audience, no applause, no judgment. Just the melody and the musician. That's freedom. That's clarity. That's the self, unfiltered by mirrors. In the end, the cognitive mirror trap is not a prison with walls, but a labyrinth of reflections. Each turn presents a different image of who you might be, shaped by shadows of expectation. But the exit lies in turning inward, in dimming the mirrors and lighting the soul. As the day winds down and silence settles in, close your eyes and imagine standing once more before the mirror. This time, it doesn't show how others see you. It simply shows you. No filters, no feedback. Just the gentle presence of your own being, staring back with quiet strength. And maybe, for the first time, you don't feel the need to adjust anything at all. Habitual belief drift. Imagine you're walking through a vast library, one so big you can't see where it ends. The shelves tower above you, stretching out in every direction, packed with books of every size and color. Reds, blues, golds, and greens, some shiny and new, others worn and faded. Each book is a belief you've carried at some point in your life, a truth you once held close, or an idea you picked up without much thought. You pause and reach for one with a faded red spine, its edges soft from time. You open it, and the pages rustle like they're whispering to you, telling a story you know by heart. Something you accepted years ago, maybe as a kid or a young adult, but never really stopped to question. As you read, a strange feeling creeps in. You don't even remember why you started believing it. Was it something someone told you? Something you saw over and over until it stuck? It's just there, sitting in your mind like dust that's settled on a shelf you haven't touched in ages. This is where it begins, what we call the habitual belief drift. The habitual belief drift isn't loud or sudden. It doesn't burst into your life with a shout or a big announcement. It's quiet, sneaky, slipping in so slowly you barely notice. It happens through the little things, repetition, the people around you, the comfort of what feels familiar. At first, your beliefs are strong and clear, like bright colors on a fresh painting. You know what you stand for, what matters to you. But as time rolls on, life starts to tug at those beliefs. The world around you, friends, family, culture, the news, acts like a tide, washing over them bit by bit. They don't get ripped away all at once. They're nudged, gently but steadily, until one day they don't look quite the same anymore. Picture a young man who once believed deeply in fairness and equality. Back then he was full of fire, speaking out against wrongs, pushing for change, refusing to let injustice slide. He saw the world in sharp lines, right and wrong, fair and unfair. But years pass, and his life shifts. Maybe he gets a good job in a system he used to criticize, one that pays well and keeps him comfortable. Maybe his friends start to see things differently, and their opinions rub off on him over coffee chats and late-night talks. Slowly, that fire in him dims. He doesn't throw his old beliefs out the window. He doesn't even decide to change them. They just drift. He starts making excuses for the things he once hated, telling himself, "That's just how it is," or "It's not so bad." The belief doesn't disappear. It reshapes into something softer, quieter, less certain. It's not because he sat down one day and chose to flip his thinking. It's the slow drip of comfort, the steady hum of voices around him, and the lack of anyone pushing back that let his beliefs slip away from where they started. This happens because of how our brains work. They're built to save energy, to take the easy road whenever they can. When you form a belief, your mind likes to stick with it. It's like setting a groove in a record that keeps playing the same tune. Repeating something makes it feel solid, safe, true. And the more you hear it, the more it sinks in, even if it wasn't yours to begin with. Maybe it was a passing comment from a teacher, a line from a movie, or something your parents said 100 times. Hear it enough, and it starts to feel like a fact. even if you never checked if it's real. Over time, with enough nudges, it becomes part of you, your voice, your thoughts, without you ever noticing the switch. Families are a big part of this drift too. Think of a kid growing up in a house where certain ideas float around, never said out loud but always there, like a shadow in the corner. Maybe it's a quiet judgment about a group of people, nothing harsh, just a raised eyebrow or a quick change of subject when they're mentioned. The kid doesn't get a lecture about it. No one sits them down and says, "This is how you should think," but it's in the air. Through little jokes at the dinner table, stories that always paint one side as the hero, or the way silence falls when certain topics come up, year after year, the kid soaks it in. Not because anyone forced it, but because it's habit. One day, they might catch themselves saying the same thing, an offhand remark, a shrug, and not even know where it came from. It's just there, woven into them by time and repetition. Society adds to the drift too, in ways we don't always see. Think about the television shows you watch, the headlines you skim, the endless scroll of posts online. Social media is like a mirror. It shows you more of what you already lean toward. You like one post, watch one video, and suddenly your feed is full of the same stuff. The algorithm doesn't care what's true or fair. It just keeps feeding you more, piling on the same ideas until they feel bigger, louder, realer. You don't decide to change your mind. You just drift along with the current, soaking in what's easy to hear. Day by day, post by post, your beliefs bend a little more, and you don't even feel the shift. The real trouble starts when you stop noticing, when those books in your mental library start rewriting themselves while you're not looking, when you can't trace back why you think the way you do, when you argue for something not because you've thought it through, but because it's what you've always said. That's when the drift takes over completely. You're not steering anymore. You're just floating, carried by habits you didn't choose. But there's a way to pull yourself back. It starts with stopping to think. Take a quiet moment amid all the noise and ask yourself, why do I believe this? Where did it come from? When did I start feeling this way? And has anything ever made me question it? These questions are like anchors. They stop you from drifting too far. They make you look at the currents you've been riding, the voices you've been listening to, and decide if they still make sense. Another way is to face things head on, not with anger, but with curiosity. Look for ideas that don't match yours. Pick up a book you'd usually skip, listen to someone you'd normally tune out. You don't have to agree with them. The point isn't to flip your beliefs overnight. It's to test them, to see if they hold up when the wind blows against them. It's like checking the roots of a tree to make sure they're deep enough to stand through a storm. Challenging yourself keeps your beliefs alive, not just floating along on autopilot. Being mindful helps too. Pay attention to what's around you, the conversations you're in, the shows you watch, the people you trust. Every little thing you hear or see, every nod you give without thinking, every assumption you let slide, it's a nudge. Notice it. Ask yourself if it's pushing you somewhere you want to go. You don't have to fight every wave, but knowing they're there gives you a chance to steer. Habitual belief drift is quiet, but it's powerful. It changes how you see the world, how you judge people, how you think about right and wrong, even how you see yourself. It can make you forget the person you used to be, the dreams you had, the things you swore you'd never accept. It can keep you from growing into the person you could become, locking you into habits you didn't mean to build. So, picture that library again. Walk down its endless aisles, your footsteps echoing in the stillness. Pull down those books of your beliefs, some heavy with years, some light with new ideas. Dust them off. Feel their weight in your hands. Open them up and read, not just to nod along, but to ask the hard questions. Is this still me? Does this still fit? What's changed since I put this on the shelf? You don't have to toss them all out or start over. Some beliefs will hold strong, shining brighter when you look closer. Others might need a rewrite, a tweak, or a gentle goodbye. That's okay. The point is to take back control, to stop drifting and start choosing. In that quiet space of thinking, of questioning, you find what's real for you. Not what the world handed you, not what habit built, but what you believe because you've looked at it, tested it, claimed it, and from there, you step forward. Not lost in the current, but steady, grounded, awake. Subtle authority bias. Imagine you're sitting in a quiet seminar room, the hum of an overhead fan barely noticeable, and in front of you stands a person in a crisp suit, their voice steady and sure. Maybe it's a professor with years of accolades. Maybe a polished speaker flown in for the day. They speak with such certainty, such calm precision, that you find yourself nodding along. You don't question, don't doubt, you simply accept. Not because the logic was flawless, not because the evidence was overwhelming, but because they said it. And your mind, like most minds, quietly whispered, "They must be right." This is the beginning of what we call the subtle authority bias. It's a psychological trap that slips under the radar, weaving into your thoughts unnoticed. It's not always loud, it doesn't shout. In fact, it often operates in silence, guiding decisions, shaping beliefs, and forming convictions based on perceived authority rather than personal discernment. Now imagine again, but this time you're scrolling. A short video pops up, someone speaking with confidence, stylish subtitles underlining every word. You don't know their background, but their tone is commanding. You feel inclined to agree. Why? Because humans, by nature, respond to authority signals. Tone, attire, titles, reputation. And the mind, in its desire to conserve energy, often lets perceived authority do the heavy lifting. Instead of analyzing the message deeply, it shortcuts through the messenger's status. This bias is rooted in our evolutionary past. In early tribes, listening to the wise elder or the skilled leader meant survival. Questioning without experience could lead to danger. Over time, this deference became embedded in the way our cognition works. But in today's world, where the symbols of authority are often manufactured, manipulated, or merely performative, this once useful instinct can lead us astray. You might be in a classroom, hearing a teacher's outdated view but never questioning it. You could be watching the news, hearing a confident anchor present opinion as fact. You might read a best-selling author, nodding along without pause. And slowly, without even realizing it, you might internalize beliefs, adopt biases, or even shape your worldview, all because someone seemed like they knew what they were talking about. Subtle authority bias doesn't only apply to traditional roles of power. It shows up in friend circles, in online influencers, in charismatic strangers. It's why some people can make wildly speculative claims, yet gather followers. It's why a well-dressed speaker might seem more trustworthy than a softly spoken genius. Let's bring this even closer. Have you ever found yourself agreeing with a person in a position of influence, even when your gut told you otherwise? Maybe you were in a group setting and didn't want to be the one to challenge the expert. Maybe the fear of appearing uninformed silenced your curiosity. This is the trap in action. Not because you lacked insight, but because you gave your thinking over to the gravity of perceived authority. Now, that doesn't mean all authority is misguided. Expertise, when earned and demonstrated, is valuable. The issue lies in the subtlety. When authority influences us unconsciously, when we stop asking, stop questioning, and start absorbing, that's where the danger lies. Awareness is the antidote. Slow down. When you feel yourself agreeing instantly, pause. Ask, do I understand this? Or am I agreeing because of who said it? Reflect on the content, not just the confidence behind it. True clarity often comes not from answers, but from better questions. Think of history's great thinkers, the ones we now revere. Most of them challenged authority. They questioned what was assumed. They looked beyond the robes, the podiums, the polished words. They listened, but they also thought. And in that balance lies wisdom. As the room grows quiet again, the speaker finishes their talk. People clap, you clap too. But now, there's a gentle awareness flickering in your mind. You don't just accept anymore. You observe, you reflect, you remain curious, and in that simple shift, you begin to escape the subtle pull of authority, not by rejecting it, but by thinking beyond it. And as you drift into rest tonight, let this linger. Not all voices that speak with power speak the truth, and not all truths come wrapped in authority. Sometimes, the quietest thought within you is the wisest of them all. Take a breath. Let the idea settle. You are allowed to question. Even the surest voice can be wrong. Even your own mind deserves a second look. Focused repetition effect. Imagine you're standing at the edge of a quiet forest. The sun has just begun to rise, and the mist clings to the tall trees like ancient secrets. You take a step forward, and beneath your feet, you notice a worn-down path that has been walked so often it's etched into the soil. It wasn't always there. Someone took the first step. Then another. Then another. Over time, the trail appeared. Not because it was planned, but because repetition carved it into the land. Our minds work the same way. The focused repetition effect is like that path in the forest. It's the mental tendency to believe that the more we repeat something there to ourselves, or hear it from others, the more true or familiar it seems. Even if it isn't, the effect is subtle. A phrase, a story, a belief repeated often enough becomes part of the terrain of our thoughts. It doesn't matter if it was fact or fiction. It begins to feel like truth, simply because we've heard it over and over again. You may have noticed this in daily life. A phrase your parents used often, like, "Money doesn't grow on trees," or "You must work hard to succeed," starts to define your worldview. You never question it. It feels like a law of nature. Or maybe it's something about yourself. "I'm just not good at math," or "I always mess things up." You've said it enough times that it's carved into your identity, even if it's not truly you. This trap isn't just about memory, it's about belief. And beliefs, once formed, have a powerful influence on behavior, decision-making, and even perception. Politicians use it in speeches. Marketers use it in ads. Repetition doesn't just help us remember, it helps us internalize. And once something is internalized, it becomes incredibly hard to unlearn. Consider a person who grows up hearing the same political slogan over and over. At first it's just noise, but then it becomes familiar, then agreeable, then unshakable. It's not always because the message is powerful, it's because it was repeated. The mind doesn't just store repetition, it accepts it. This is why propaganda works. This is why self-affirmations can shift someone's mindset. This is why false news, when echoed, begins to feel like real news. In learning, repetition is key, but in life, unexamined repetition can be dangerous. The focused repetition effect isn't just about rote memorization, it's about unconscious absorption. The more we encounter something, the less we resist it. To escape this trap, we must become mindful of our inner dialogue. Pay attention to what you're repeating to yourself and to others. Ask, is this really true? Or have I just heard it too many times? Rewire the path. Replace, "I'm not good at this," with, "I'm learning." Replace, "I always fail," with, "I've failed, but I've grown." Create new paths in the forest of your mind. Repeat those. Focus on them. Let them become your new truths. Because repetition is powerful, but choice is more powerful. The inner maze. Imagine being inside a massive ancient labyrinth. The walls are high, and every turn looks the same. You walk through it day after day, trying to find the exit. But something feels strange. Some paths seem too familiar. You keep ending up at the same spots, walking in circles, lost in a world you've created. This is the inner maze. It's the psychological trap where your mind becomes a puzzle made of your own thoughts, fears, and repeated behaviors. It's not built by others. It's built by you. And the more you rely on automatic reactions, old patterns, and unchecked assumptions, the more lost you become in it. Everyone has an inner maze. It's the result of mental habits. When something happens, we respond based on what's familiar, not what's best. We replay the same emotional reactions. We draw the same conclusions. We follow the same mental paths, even if they lead nowhere. The inner maze is tricky because it doesn't feel like a maze. It feels like comfort. You don't notice you're lost. You think, this is just who I am. But who you are is often just who you've repeated yourself to be. Think of someone who always assumes people are judging them. Every social situation becomes stressful. They retreat, overthink, avoid eye contact. They build walls. And over time, that reaction becomes default. It becomes automatic. They forget that there might be another path, one where people aren't judging, one where they can breathe. The inner maze can also look like perfectionism, or procrastination, or anger. These aren't just traits, they are routes you've walked again and again until they became the only roads you know. To escape the inner maze, you must first realize you're in one. That awareness is the key. Then, you must slow down, observe. Ask yourself why you feel what you feel, why you do what you do. Begin to choose new responses, different reactions. At first, these new paths will feel strange, overgrown, difficult. But with time and practice, they become clear. They become yours. There is no map to the inner maze, but there is a way out, and that way is choice, reflection, stillness. As we conclude this long journey through the many psychological traps that shape our minds, remember this. Every bias, every loop, every illusion, it's not a flaw in you. It's a part of being human. What matters is not avoiding every trap, but learning to notice them, to walk through your own mind with curiosity, not fear. You are not broken. You are learning. And in this learning, you find freedom. So breathe. Let the stories rest. Let the noise fade. And sleep well, knowing you've taken the first step out of the maze. And that's it. Hope you're in peace. Just consider subscribing, because sleep matters. Just then, stress scatters, and nothing else matters, right? Peace out.